was nice.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the Monday, June 2022 Roanoke County School Board work session to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Greenway.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnny.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Linder.
Yes, ma'am. All right, we'll dive right into information items. Item 2.01, the 2022-2023 budget work session update. Ms. Peterson.
Good morning, good afternoon. I don't even know what time of day it is. So I'm here to present to you what has fallen out of the General Assembly budget. I will start off with just letting you know that I have been in touch with the county, and we have missed all possible deadlines to adopt a revision before July 1st. So they're not even going to think about revising their budget until in July. So everything that we talk about as far as adding revenues to our budget for revision, we can consider it next year. We're just going to have to start the year rolling with the budget that was approved by you on April 5th. So it just was a timing thing.
So what are we doing here?
Well, because you still need to know the state revenues that we have. And
This
we
is-
were really hoping to be able to adopt it ahead of time, but we just missed all, since the governor didn't sign until,
So we're just gonna leave the budget, but we're gonna do what we want to.
Now, this is the same information that I sent out to you guys last week, so nothing's changed since then, so.
It's
Okay.
blurred to me. But, I guess the question is, so if we're not gonna revise the budget, this is just information?
for right now, but we will be revising it. I mean, it's gonna be revised. It's just,
Okay.
we scheduled the meeting with the expectation that we would be able to revise the budget before June 30th, and the county thought that they would be able to, but since the governor announced, when I can't even remember, but it was a Thursday that he announced the budget landed in his desk, and he took a week to sign it, and that was after all notices had to be to the Roanoke Times by the county in order to hold a public hearing and revise their budget. And so that was kind of the sticking point. But we do need to move forward, and you need to hear the information that came out of it, because it's up for consideration for you for when we do go forward with the budget.
Okay.
So we'll take a look at the state revenues, some additional ARPA funds opportunities, the technology replacement safety updates that we put in, we revised the tech plan because of the state update and for some safety items that were recently identified. We'll take a quick look at the priority lists and then review the remaining timeline. So go into the state revenues. So on the screen, we've got a summary of where the 2022 budget is, what we adopted, and what the General Assembly finally adopted. And then the difference is the increase from the General Assembly adoption over what we currently have as our original 2023 budget. You'll see there's a small increase in SOQ excluding sales tax. There's a large increase in the sales tax, and that's going to be coming from the re-implementation of the grocery tax. The state put back the portion that goes back to the localities, and so that increased our sales tax revenue. We've got a small amount in there for incentive and a little bit of a reduction in lottery funds. And so in the general fund, we will have 1.48 million approximately additional revenue coming in that can be spent. If you keep looking down at the other funds, we do have 146,129 reduction in state money that goes into the technology replacement fund that will put them in a hole, and so we'll have to increase our transfer to them using the additional state money to ensure that the tech replacement stays whole. So I'll go over that. I've got a slide about that. There's a little bit increase in here for the mentor grant, and then the 4.3 million is the increase in the capital, one of the capital grants that the state has kept in there. So the next one is kind of a summary of the highlights of the budget. This is pretty much the same slide that I presented before when we brought the crossover budget. The first column was what the governor proposed in December, and then the House column is what we originally adopted. And now the General Assembly will show you kind of the difference. And so for the sales tax, it was reduced in the House budget, but it was increased with the General Assembly budget. With compensation, the House had a 4% raise and a 1% bonus. The General Assembly reverted back to a 5% raise. This raise will be 5% in each year of the biennium. You will have to give a raise of at least 2.5% in order to qualify for a portion of the raise. And any excess that you provide in one year does not qualify towards the following year. So we're giving 6% in FY '23, that extra 1% does not go towards the 1% the following year. So it will have to be a clear minimum of 2.5% in '24 up to a maximum of 5% in that year. There was guidance that was handed down that I'm going to go over in detail. The state does have a pot of money of the ARPA funds left over, and they have decided to provide a bonus to all SOQ funded positions. That's not going through the revenue sharing agreement or the revenue formula. However, I think a lot of the funds will end up being complementing this bonus. So I'll go over that as well. The early reading initiative that was put forth by the governor was taken out by the House and it stayed out with the General Assembly. The grocery tax hold harmless. They actually included the personal and hygiene products in our hold harmless piece to provide us more hold harmless out of that line item. And then you can see the 4.3 million construction grants are back in.
So this is probably something I shouldn't say, but going back to that last, can you go back to that? Can we, I mean, assume that this is pretty friendly from the governor because of the, when you talk about the 5% raises that went there, he expanded the initiative, the early reading initiative, and he's given 5.6 million where they really didn't give that much at all in those, from the House and the General Assembly, on either one.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Keep in mind, that was the previous governor too, back
Was
in
it?
December.
Well, so, but is he not, is the current one, is he in line with this, or is that, I mean, wouldn't he have to be to get this passed?
When I read through because the bill went back to the governor, and he didn't sign it last Thursday, but what he did was he had certain items that he struck through. Thank you. No, that didn't sound right.
Veto.
And some items that he asked for revision. There really was nothing that affected these line items. The only thing that he added some additional funds in there for early reading specialists that we do not qualify for anyway. And so that was a moot point for our school division.
So they're both kind of on this, that's pretty good, if I understood that.
Yeah, they both have their
Good.
mark, I do believe.
Good.
So we will have the 4.3.
I'm going to talk about that more in the next
Okay.
presentation, but it is in the budget and we can apply for it.
Are you also going to talk about how many SOQ positions, or how many positions above SOQs do we have in house?
Just go get
For
into
bonus?
that detail, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's actually on this page. Y'all are always one page ahead of me. I can't talk fast enough for you. So this next page talks about the ARPA funded bonus that the state is handing out. On the left-hand side, you'll see the impact of the bonus on our division. They are providing $1.3 million. That is a $1,000 bonus plus the FICA that we would have to pay out on that. They are saying that the bonuses will be paid on December 1st, and they have provided enough funds for the SOQ funded instructional and support positions. And so that's only $1,255 0.6 employees. They do encourage us to provide it to all staff, and it has always been our policy. Anytime the state pushes something down to only SOQ funded positions, we would, as a division, carry that forward to all employees. So when we calculated that out, we have 2,264 employees on that we're budgeting for. And so the total cost would be 2.4 million. And if you take out the ARPA funding that they're going to provide of 1.35 million, we've got to spend about 1.1 million of that new money that you saw on that first slide for this bonus. So that's kind of good and bad news, because we're getting 1.3 million, but we're going to have to spend our additional money on a bonus as opposed to doing what I know you would rather do, which is a percent increase for our employees, because that would help them better than just a bonus. Unfortunately, our hands are tied, and if you wanted to spend our money from the state differently, we would have to refuse the bonus, because I just
So we
can't
have,
see.
and to clarify on this, so we, I don't know if y'all all heard from Courtney with RCEA. I did, and wanted to know more about the bonus. We're locked into having to give the bonus. This is not something.
If you want to get the money.
Right.
Right, take the
So
money or
that, I
not.
just want them to, and
Yeah, I
Courtney, if
appreciate
you're
you
listening,
saying
RCA,
that.
if you're.
Yeah, that's why I was emailing you guys last week was, looks like we're getting, like Susan said, the $1.4 million additional if everything came through what the General Assembly had, but 1.1 of that immediately goes into this.
Right, so we, just so everyone hears, we're locked into the bonus by the state.
Well, it doesn't give you too much left over,
Right,
does it?
no,
It
so,
really doesn't.
that, I guess, takes care of that issue.
And I wanted to also, for everybody's benefit, because the last time we gave a bonus, we talked gross dollars of the bonus. There is a significant chunk of taxes that are applied towards the bonus. So anytime we hand out a bonus to an employee or a stipend one time to an employee, they are taxed at 35.4%.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's over here in the right-hand column.
Wow.
22% is federal taxes, 5.75% is state taxes, and then you have the 7.65% that's the FICA taxes. And so I kind of like whole numbers, so I calculated everything on a bonus of $1,006.19, because that gave a cash net in our pockets of our employees of $650.
And the reason being is because they take out the taxes and then you'll get it back when you file your taxes, if you can. But they take out the maximum, and that's all bonuses, they do that too. Just so you can cover the tax and someone doesn't come up and say, well, really should be taxed at 18%. So hopefully they'll get something back when they file their taxes.
Something more than the 650.
Right,
So at the bare minimum, depending upon the bracket,
yeah,
they're ended up with.
650, right.
And just, I know you all understand this, but Mr. Greenway's point earlier about clarity, in terms of what the state says we have to do, the state says we have to give, if we want to be, take advantage of this money, we have to give the straight $1,000 bonus to SOQ funded positions. Our practice has been to, give that to non-SOQ funded positions, that's one thing. And then what Ms. Peterson's recommending is, so that you have a nice net, at least of the 650 after taxes versus some odd change, her recommendation would be that we make it $1,619. That's not something we have to do, that would be something that we would just recommend.
Now, what, okay, well, maybe this is another page. So we're not, any room for any other increase?
I mean, there'll be a little bit.
Well, and then that is another page in
All right,
terms of
another
other
page.
possibilities.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because this, what, 1.1 for 1%, I believe, right? Somewhere around there.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Y'all don't let her talk.
They want to get to the good stuff. I do want to make you aware of another ARPA grant that is available to us. I feel like half the time I come in front of you, I'm asking for money for an ARPA grant. So this one is a recruitment and retention support grant. The maximum that is available to school divisions is $30,000. And it can be used for hiring incentives or for continuing education funds. I know that Dr. McClung is working with Ms. Harmon, and they're getting together the logistics so that we can help our provisional special education teachers with their tuition costs to get their full licensure to teach special education. So that's going to be part of that. We will put this grant on the consent agenda for the next meeting so that they can go ahead and send the application in. It is due July 1st. So I did want to really quickly share with you a little bit about the technology replacement plan updates. So in the first column is 2023, and the items that are in red are the only ones that have changed, and you'll see the only thing that changed are revenue sources. So the state infrastructure and operations funds went down by that 146,000 oddish number. So we added that to the transfer from the general fund to ensure that they stayed whole. Mr. Terry did go through and update down on the replacement needs. He took a look at some of the items that we are looking at, such as the Raptor system for security management, the reunification program, and several other programs for security. And he went ahead and built those in the out years. Now, they don't affect what we have to transfer in this year, but we did want to go ahead and get it built into the technology plan. So that's the building security at the first line, and then some server licenses down at the bottom relatable to the same items. And then there are some computer leases where we've built in the nutrition department cash register laptops and the cafeteria manager laptops in 2026 and beyond. So these are not things for the current year budget, but just wanted to make you aware of these changes.
Are there any grants moving forward with us?
Well, the Virginia Department of Education always has a security grant that Mr. Terry applies for. And in fact, I just sent him, they have the application open now, and I just sent him some information about that,
Okay.
which he would have had anyway. He's usually ahead of me on those.
Yeah. And just as a reminder, you may have just said that, but, you know, we did get a grant to provide the digital mapping for the schools, which will really enhance our security as well. We got some grant money for that.
Good.
So like with the digital mapping, that is one of the costs. We're using a grant to build it out to begin with, the largest portion of it, but there's a smaller licensure cost that is built into this plan. But that's why we wanted to make this update, to get all these extra pieces in while they were fresh in our mind. So to get to the priority lists that I know you're all excited about, we've got the short list. So yes, the big long list that we have still exists, but this is really kind of narrowed down short list that we're working from now. And then the first, they're kind of grouped in sections by kind of priority. The first three items, and I did not put them to subtract from what's available, but basically the first three is going to take up the majority of the funds that the state has given us. The bonus is in there for the 1.1 million, and the increase to the tech fund for the reduction in state revenue for 146,129. We've built in reclassifying the REAP and PEEP IAs to coaches for 141,700. The next line item is an amount for 4 additional SRO deputies. I did add the FICA in here to ensure that we covered all of the costs for the sheriff's department. That is something that Dr. Nicely will be exploring more in depth. That is something that I think they want to go ahead and build out now. I did take a look at our payroll numbers right now for next year, and we do have a number of positions that are not filled. And so if they are not filled, I did the math and I took out our personnel lapse. We can cover that for right now in personnel lapse, but it would be if we get more money from the county, that would be one of the lines we would want to definitely build into the actual budget itself.
Is that $17, $19 an hour from $17 to $19 an hour.
That's the bus driver rate, that's a separate thing from the deputies, or you?
Oh, I'm
That's-
sorry.
That's a separate thing.
I thought what you
Yeah,
said.
and that's where we were discussing a couple weeks ago, where we really needed to increase that $12 rate, which, wasn't very good for those bus driver activity trips. So,
I'm sorry if I jumped, I thought
So-
you went to that.
right, it's two different things, yes, sir. So I think it's in italics because that was absorbable. So that's something that we kind of put in there for you guys to look at as far as the pay plan goes, but it's not going to require any additional funding. That's why she put absorbable there.
Okay.
And then the deputy thing, we're going to have a separate presentation on that for you to consider. So what she's saying there is, and I think I indicated this to you last, even though we don't have, additional local funds yet that we're hoping to get, we feel confident that if need be, if something terrible happened, if we didn't get any more, we could absorb that cost. We would ask, though, that if we do get additional local funds, that we go back and, in a revised budget, build that in.
Okay.
And if, were you going, Cheryl? I'm sorry.
I'm good.
If we want to, certainly all of us, I think, have gotten to the point maybe that we want to see more, which would be an additional, if it's 108 for 4, it'd be 473 more for 12, right? I mean, somewhere along there.
What I think Mr. Hudson could probably provide, these are retired deputies, and so
Yeah.
there might not be enough bodies to fill that request.
Yeah, if you told me you needed a dozen, that's gonna take a lot of time.
We needed,
Yeah,
Well,
I
The
mean,
pool's not that deep.
no, I mean, because, well, when we get into the slide, I'll explain a little more, but,
Okay.
we're very stringent upon who we put in these positions. So, there's a whole criteria, just like there is for hiring a regular deputy. So,
and we got 16.
right, so it
Schools.
will take a
12
lot of
more.
time, a lot of time to find, people that are qualified for the job and can do the job, and then getting them trained, outfitted, and it would be a long process. Whether that be full-time or part-time people, you're gonna be hard-pressed to hire 12 people in probably a year.
So I guess solution, where do we get 12 more?
Go ask the board of supervisors for a lot of money.
Didn't we do that?
Well, I can tell you what, I'm going to.
Yeah,
So-
well, I mean, you look at what Roanoke City was in that article.
But
I
I'll
sent
wait
you.
until we get to that discussion, but yeah, I'm
I
absolutely.
do have a question about, and this might not be a popular thing to say, but I'm just kind of looking at it from the standpoint of, it's so close to give everybody a 1% raise versus give everybody else beyond those SOQs that bonus. I mean, I know raises are reoccurring expenses, but I guess if I were in a non-funded, SOQ position or whatever you would call it, I'd be happy to get an additional 1%, even though knowing that, the others are getting the bonus. But across the board, everybody's getting that additional percent. You see what I'm saying? I mean, what,
I'm not sure that would be physically possible.
well, I'm just saying, like,
Because we'd have to pick and choose which, because we don't, it's not like we take a person and say you are the SOQ person.
Okay.
And you are not an SOQ person.
Is that like when it comes to like IAs and like that?
Yeah.
Some are
And you have,
SOQ,
like-
some not, then you're looking at that IA.
oh,
and
so
saying,
you're saying basically it's not defined by position, it's defined by actual
Like,
employee
right.
themselves.
Yeah, like, we don't take each employee and say, you're an SOQ and you're not the SOQ.
Okay, I
that's-
thought it was maybe like instructional people were covered and then,
what it
support
is-
staff
what it
weren't.
is, somebody higher up might say, okay, well, you as a school, you need 3 IAs. Well, we know in reality, we need 6 to really do the job, so you see what I'm saying? So
Gotcha.
certain IAs are covered, but then others are not.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I figured it was just defined by job
Right.
specific.
If we could, that would be lovely. but
It would be great,
we
because,
don't,
you would be able to.
Unfortunately. And they even take like the SOQs and they still have the cap, although they released a little bit of the cap and gave us a little bit more money from that. But it's still a fake cap that's put on our support positions. And so they may say, well, we need one whole body for this position, but we're gonna cap you at like 3/4 of the body. So then how do you
Right.
give that out?
Okay.
So just to clarify that, the way Ms. Peterson has this chunk, the first chunk pretty much covers that 1.4 million that we are pretty sure we're getting additional from the state. And then the rest of this, we would need for consideration in the additional funds locally.
Just out of curiosity, on those SOQ numbers, do they drill down and look at the different, I mean, do they base it per school, or is it total number of positions that we have with total number of students?
It's both. It could be both, depending on how they market it. Sometimes it's per school, sometimes it's per division-wide. And Ms. Pearson's right, there really is no rhyme or reason. You might have like 1 1/3 librarian that's allowed at this school, where at this school you might have a half a librarian. Well, I mean, it's crazy how they do those things.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but for example, would this also be true of like our elementary assistant principals?
Correct.
Like by SOQs, we probably don't qualify for hardly any
We don't.
elementary assistant principals.
Correct.
Almost all of those are non-SOQ funded.
And just until this year, I think that when the SOQs changed this year, last year, we didn't qualify for all principals in all our elementary schools.
So we're going above and beyond,
Yes.
which is really important for people to
Right.
understand.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly, you're exactly right, because the state doesn't really always recognize the fact that in order to get the job done, right, it requires a lot more people than they say it does, or, you know.
Well, and part of that fake cap, if you will, was a cost-saving measure for them back in the day.
Sure.
And they just haven't fully provided the funds back to us for that.
We've been fighting the cap for years.
It's sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is
It
sad.
really is.
They went in, they, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's the
But
giving
they
the
agreed
bare
to it.
minimum to cover.
Yeah, they,
But I think we are doing a great job going above and beyond.
So if we get any more local funds, did you finish going over?
No, I was actually gonna talk about the bus driver rate next.
Okay, sorry.
To Mr. Greenway's question, so the bus driver rate, that was moving the, during the school day, trips to $17 and the after-school day trips to $19. And we had presented that and it was approved, at the last work session. So what we wanted to do is make sure we could absorb that cost going forward. And Ms. King went through and took a look at that, and she does think that that's absorbable within her budget, to not ask for additional budget dollars.
Okay.
So then the next two lines you can see are self-explanatory. It's how much a 1.5% would cost if we got additional money. And then the bottom three, so with the CMP, you know, that is part of policy and part of the county's policy that we set aside $1 million every year from our general fund to our minor capital fund for CMP projects. They have agreed to let us put part of it in this year with the thought that part of it would go in with year-end funds. However, if we get enough money from the county, because they've got to revise their budget too, then it may behoove us to go ahead and build that in up front, for reasons we'll talk during the capital planning discussion about. Then athletic field mowing came to about $192,750, and to get the assistant supervisor of maintenance, that'll be $67,600. So those are the other items on the short list.
Now, that athletic field mowing, is that across the board, high school and middle school, or is that just high school?
That was for middle school and high school, right, Mr. Lowe, and then, to give them that allotment, remember we talked about with the ADs to give, I think we would probably keep the funds over here, but let them choose who they want and that kind of thing, and kind of keep some control over that, but give them, but actually fund it for them.
Thank you.
On the bus driver, I've been, I don't know, trying to rack ways that you could come up with attracting additional drivers. Has anybody thought, is this even worth putting out there to, instead of insurance, if they, you know, if they're Medicare or whatever, that we could provide for their supplement? Is that even, and that's a little deeper discussion, but I thought, you know, if I'm a retired person and want something to do, keep me active or whatever, if you'll pay my supplement as part of, you know, the cost of doing business, you know, I might say, well, you know what, it's worth it for me just to get out there and,
So you mean a cash in lieu of insurance?
I don't know, you gotta have to think, you have, somebody's
such
gonna
a
have to be
variance,
smarter than
too.
I am. What's that?
depending on their income or their
Yeah, right.
wealth, it could be hardly anything, 50, I don't know, dollars a month.
It
could
a
be
lot for
$250
somebody.
a month. So I guess you'd have to look at, what would be, and maybe more cases than not, it would be more in the lower range.
Right. Well,
Which would
but
be-
my thought, with fixed income now,
Yeah.
and what we know we're going through with inflation and gas prices and all that, it may mean something to somebody if you said, hey, and I don't know the cost, but if you said, you know what, we're willing to pay your $200 as part of, and again, you'd have to think about it within pay and all that. But, if you wanted to come work for us as a driver, and we pay your Medicaid or Medicare or whatever the supplement is, we're willing to do that to get you to drive.
Well, I can say that Mr. Bradshaw and I spoke at length with our healthcare consultant about a cash in lieu of insurance. And I don't have the details in front of me because we looked at this like 4 months ago. They highly advise against it because it is a very tricky, we can do it, but it is a very tricky and difficult legal path that you have to follow if you start doing that.
Well, here's what I would say is, we've got to come up outside of the box. We can't continue to expect our mechanics, supervisors, and everybody else to drive these buses. At some point, we got to have drivers, and I think that's just one of those ways. Now, how it works, somebody smarter than me would have to come to the table, but somewhere, we've got to come up with some, I don't want to call them gimmicks, but we've got to come up with some trade-off or some,
Extra incentives.
yes.
I would probably recommend divorcing it from the insurance itself and just looking at a bonus.
Okay.
Or something specific. So that keeps it a little cleaner.
Or
We
just
could
higher
call it-
pay altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what that looks like versus what we're talking about with insurance and stuff, but I mean, if we're talking about doing that, I don't know if higher pay would,
We got to do something.
Yeah, they're not gonna take any benefits that Medicare, they're not gonna use it. So, I mean, what's incentive for them?
Well, they have to pay
at
for
that
that
point?
supplement, that's all I was thinking.
And the supplement, if you gave a certain amount, but you say it's pretty tricky, so I guess
It
you're
really
looking, lean
wasn't.
more towards a bonus, but then you gotta do all bonus. Unless.
well, and that's the thing too, and then we do a
You could
hiring,
do a
but
bonus for just specific employee groups. They're a hard-to-fill group, and we could design it for
So
just
can you, are you allowed, because I don't remember either, in terms of legality of it, are you allowed to give an extra incentive, an extra bonus, or what have you, just to the ones who don't take the insurance? Are you
See, I
allowed to?
think then you're getting into the tricky legal ramifications of marrying it with the insurance.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Ms. Pearson's right, and since we're self-insured, that's where the tricky part comes in, while we're advised not to do that, because the more people that we take off of our insurance, then the more it costs our people that are on our insurance. So we really don't want to incentivize people not to have our
But
insurance.
these are probably folks who are not,
Yeah.
Right,
I'm
so
not-
bonus would be better for all, I think, instead of picking and choosing whether you're on our insurance or not. But I
Yeah.
agree with you, you're right, we need to figure out something, but I think that was the real reason
And-
she
and-
was talking about that.
What, did she say we cannot offer that to just one employee group? I think that had to be across the
I
board.
think that's correct.
And that's what made it so tricky, because just like what Mr.
Right,
Bradshaw
the
is
bus driver.
reminding,
Have a mess
Right,
that
I don't
goes.
have our insurance because I'm military, I'm fortunate enough, but if we do it for bus drivers, and she said, well, honestly, we'd have to then open this exact same type of thing up to everybody in our division, and that's where we get into the whole self-insured piece, of incentivized piece of people not.
Well,
to take it.
let's think it this way, and you tell me if this is I don't know if it's discrimination, I guess it would be discrimination against the lower group. Could you put in an incentive for 65 plus, because you know they're Medicaid or Medicare?
I don't think you can. I
You
don't
know,
think
you
that's
can't do
legal.
it for age, I get it, I mean, if you can't, but I'm just thinking if there's a way to, do something with that group.
Can I ask, how many positions are still open?
How many bus driver positions?
I don't know where we stand currently, do you know?
I don't have that number right now. no,
well,
I don't.
what about I know the food service workers, we were in bad shape too, weren't we?
We
Correct.
still are.
Yep.
Well, and that's why I say, I'm not saying just bus drivers, but that could be food service. If there's some retired folks that we could bring back.
And you all did just increase, you did include, restore the health insurance benefit to nutrition, so hopefully that'll help some, but it probably won't get us completely there.
Right.
And these would be people that were more in the 65-plus age
Right,
group.
that's what I'm saying. You're actually, if I said discriminating, you're discriminating against the younger folks. But to me, you're trying to get that nucleus of folks to come back and have a reason, you know, the retired folks to come back. And anyway,
Why don't we, if it'd be okay, versus folks relying on memory, why don't we bring that back and just as a refresher and kind of lay out exactly what pathways are possible and not possible, and that way we can
okay.
continue the conversation.
I will say, I read an interesting article a while back that the shortages that we're seeing, they are global and they were gonna come regardless of COVID. Evidently, it's the baby boomers' fault that we're
I said that already. Wow.
losing.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Have we polled
Soon
them?
we're gonna have automated buses.
Have we polled these folks? I know we've
We'll
kind of
just
asked
start
them,
remote.
but have we
driving
polled
maybe.
the whole group to kind of see what their opinion is on it?
I think they want bonuses.
I mean, it might be a good idea.
The
just-
last time
A lot of
that I think
times
Ms.
bonus.
King polled, they.
Oh, it's
they
money.
said they
Especially
wanted
around
bonuses.
Christmas.
It always comes to, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Anything else on? So then, the next thing I wanted to bring forth to you is the grant list. These are items that we had on the unfunded list, but they are either already covered in a grant, or we built them into the grant this year, and we wanted to just bring them forth and get the official approval from you, because we want them to take effect July 1st. And so what we like to do is for the items in red, provide them to you for consent agenda approval at the next board meeting, since that will be before July 1st. And that would include, and I do remember mentioning this once before, under ARPA 3, officially putting the 5 reading specialists in for middle schools and continuing the hard-to-fill special ed stipend. It would be $2,500 for licensed and $1,250 for those working towards their licensure. And then down at the bottom, the IDEA, moving all of 6 of the special ed supervisor contracts from 240 to 260 days. So those are items that we've built into the grants that will self-fund those items, but they were pay plan related, and so we wanted to bring them to your attention, that we built them out there, and we would like to go ahead and get that on the consent agenda at the next board meeting to approve that, and we can move forward.
Have we identified a need at Green Valley? Is that why we're doing that one school?
That's the largest elementary, so they just, do they qualify for it by SOQ?
Over 500.
Yes, it's right there on the borderline with it. Yeah, they're the only
Over
school we have
500.
that's over 500 elementary.
Yeah.
But Cundiff is right at 500.
They're like at 495 right
There
now.
you go. So how does that fit in at Cundiff and Green Valley with that position?
I think it's SOQ versus not.
Well, Mr. Hudson?
Remember we
What are you
talked,
saying? So
when we
over
went to
500.
the,
Yeah.
we went to the
Not-
student,
not-
I'm sorry, go
You
ahead.
Go ahead. I was-
Tim, you were involved in it. I think your students told you the same thing. When we went to that student conference, and the biggest thing was counseling and not being able to get to a counselor.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
and I guess we really need to get them to do like a presentation or something to kind of see the difference. I know life counselors and kind of what they do, but where the line stops and where our actual counselors are. And I guess instead of increasing some of these life counselors, do we need to look at adding regular counselors versus the life counselor? Because if we already have some in some of our schools, which I think most of our high school, or all of our high schools have them, correct?
Mhm.
And then the high school students were the ones that were telling us that they were having a hard time being able to see a counselor.
Well, your counselor is more the academic, and then the life counselor is more for.
Well, like drugs and
Hearing
alcohol
talent.
and, but I guess from the middle
And a lot of
school.
times, that's where some of the needs, and we were falling short, I think.
But you know what we found out with our life counselor? I'm not sure that the defined duties were understood. So.
But they're not academic, they're more.
There were some unique situations with that.
The students
Okay,
didn't understand
okay,
is what,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we need to add more life counselors
Yeah.
personally
Yeah,
than
I agree.
academic
Yes.
counselors.
I agree. I
And,
think
and
there's.
if you wanted to streamline things a little bit better, I think we could, as a county, ask our academic counselors to create videos or stuff that can be repeated over and over again for our academic side. And we don't utilize that technology personally as a parent, I think.
I know, and we're at, what is it, 800 and some in the middle school, 800?
No,
You're like
It's so
780.
I
many.
agree with that, but.
It's so many before you get another counselor.
Right.
Well, I guess where I'm getting at, I know you said academic counselor, but let's say a child has a mental health issue that they're dealing with, and, you know, from what I've been told by a lot of teachers, and, you know, they're having to pretty much counsel a lot of these kids. Not saying that the counselor doesn't have the ability to do so, but I don't know if it's a time thing or is what I'm getting at. So do the life counselors, do they handle mental health issues?
Yes.
That's what they are specifically trained to do, because in most of the schools, a couple of not, they're actually licensed, mental health providers, versus the traditional school counseling. The traditional school counselors, it's not just academic counseling, they help with.
Well, that's what I
all
was getting at,
kinds
is when
of
you said academic, I
personal
was
problems.
thinking it was more,
It's not just academic.
right,
Yeah.
from my experience, it was a lot more.
But they do follow their courses and they got problems with the
Right.
academics and then the life counselors, I think that's where we were falling short. That's what I heard from the.
Me too.
Well, and to
From the
Brent's
students.
point, I think we, at least with my group, we did hear that they can't, and so the academic counselors at one point, back in the dark ages, maybe when I was there, they kind of did academic and life
Right.
counseling. And I think counselors are still, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Dr. Nicely, but I think they're still there. They're counselors, not just academic counselors.
Right, that's what I was just
And to,
explaining, yes.
right, and to Mr. Hudson's point, I assume they know that, right? I mean, that in each school, they understand that there's more than academic counseling. And what I was hearing from our students, and I think Mr. Hudson was speaking to, is they can't get to these students with a lot of the issues and questions that they're bringing forward, the counselors.
The life counselors can't get to them.
Well, and the academic counselors don't even think that's, and if I understand, again, y'all know better than I do, but if I'm understanding correctly and what the kids were telling me, and keep in mind, these are the brightest of the brightest. These aren't me in those schools. These are those kids. And, I don't think the academic counselors felt like they had time to deal with some of the life issues, and the kids definitely felt like they didn't have someone they could go to for the life issues. Which brings me back to that Green Valley Elementary. It's not that I don't think they need it, but when we're talking about 495 kids at Cundiff, if 5 students are the difference, we will move 5 from Horn over. But the point is, and we've talked about this, in my mind, it's a little different from, the Title I schools trying to, with 500 kids versus, 500 kids the other way. But anyway,
Right. We could definitely
Mr.
look at-
Hudson's point is well taken, that right now, we need life counselors as all counselors. I know we got to have the academic piece.
How many of them, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we had talked about this previously, maybe another meeting, or maybe I don't remember properly, but we were gonna ask Jessica to kind of create a program for us, a presentation, to understand exactly the roles and how they were marketing themselves in the schools, because what I heard from most of my students was that they didn't know how to access it. And the marketing of it maybe was not as great. And then even some of we were talking about at one point, correct me if I'm wrong, some of our staff, maybe they need some help too, and how do they access this and these services? So I think we should get Jessica to come in, and I think she was going to do that, and we should
Good
continue
idea.
that path, because this is a larger discussion.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're using our money to the
Yeah.
best of our ability, get the most bang for the buck, in other words.
Yeah, I agree.
And do we know if academic counselors, are they trained to do life counseling?
Well,
They are?
when we say life counseling,
Okay.
keep in mind, yes, traditional school counselors, they're doing all kinds of things, right? They're running groups with, students with have particular needs, that kind of thing. They're doing the academic piece, but as well as, all kinds of other social emotional counseling. When we added the life counselor, that took the place of, you
SAP.
remember, the old SAP program, which was more substance focused, but we expanded that life program to say, hey, we have some real acute just mental health needs, right? That requires more of a clinical approach. And that's where we really wanted to hire those, certified, folks to fill those roles. And so gosh, you guys supported that, what is it, about 4 years ago now? And I think it's been, a really great thing. And who even knew 4 years ago we'd see the needs that we see now? So I think the answer from my point of view is yes, yes, and yes. We need more and more. This particular situation is, keep in mind with Green Valley, that's already in place. She's just proposing to move the money around. So it doesn't mean that we don't need some additional ones maybe elsewhere, but that one was a particular SOQ thing that we needed to comply with due to the size of the school.
To Mr. Greenway's point, though, I mean, on a Title I school as opposed to Green Valley is not exactly, I mean, I could see a need for a counselor over at Cundiff more so than I could at Green Valley, just based on demographics.
But the demographics over there changes a lot.
Yeah, Green Valley's demographics have changed.
Yeah, they have transient, I mean, I'm saying the way they come in from the apartments that are surrounded there. So you just don't know sometimes
I'm saying
That's
this,
busting
in-
what's gonna happen, but,
I'm saying this in the kindest way I possibly can.
well, we're not saying that
No, I
one
know,
is
I know,
not. I
I
mean,
know.
no, there's not a
But an SOQ
number
is an
cutoff
SOQ. A
that I
number is a
think,
number.
I really don't. I don't think that that's where we
We-
ought to be.
We as a group were already
We
made the
agree.
decision to do that a couple of years ago, so this is just moving the money around. I mean, yes, do we need to continue to try to find funding and add those in? Absolutely. I mean.
More grant money for more like counselors, things like that.
Yeah, we need,
Absolutely.
So just a point of clarification, that
you're gonna
middle
move five
group that's,
over anyway.
I'm willing.
Sorry,
Have some
Susan.
grandchildren you can
Well,
move over to?
Go ahead,
We got one
Ms.
covered.
Peterson.
sorry, just the point of clarification, the middle group that's in black, that was approved by the school board back in August of '21, when we applied for the ARPA grant to begin with. And those positions were put in for all of '22, all of '23, and all of '24. And so those positions, so they have stayed in our funding request list because we want to fund the real positions in our real budget as opposed to through the grant. Because we're going to find that we're gonna see a fiscal cliff when we hit June of 2024 and we're seeing positions go away. It was one thing when we hired, all of the special ed positions for 1 year because they knew for a fact this is 1 year. This is just to get us through the hump, through the COVID, to get everybody back in the classroom, get you used to being back in the classroom. And we were successful in being able to pull those positions, with the turnover, the ones who wanted to stay were able to find regular positions. And so we didn't hit the fiscal cliff as much because the extra positions just disappeared, but the bodies stayed with us because others left or retired. But with this group right here, I just wanted to, is that mine or yours? Okay. Don't scare me like that. So those are already built into the ARPA grant. It was just the two up at the top that, if you recall, I think it was maybe back in December, Mr. Greenway, you had mentioned something about the nurses still being in the ARPA grant. Well, we reduced the nurses that were in the grant and reallocated it to these positions, these amounts at the time, but we didn't bring it back for formal approval. And then at the bottom, the IDEA grant, you approved the grant, but we just didn't get it off of this list to give you to approve it through the pay plan. And so I just wanted to formalize bringing the items in red that had not been officially approved back to you for consent before July 1st. If that makes sense. I know it's very confusing. I apologize for
Well,
that.
no, it's not, I mean, the confusing part is, I'm gonna let it go. I'll just let it go. How we don't see that is beyond me, but let it go.
I see it, I
Let me-
understand.
Let me let it go.
Yeah, I understand.
I would think y'all would be fighting harder for
Well, we
those.
can still discuss it, we
Yeah,
just have to
I
wait
get it.
for the money
I
to
get
come
it.
down the pipeline until we
Yeah.
have the money.
Yeah.
But I
All
think
right,
it should be
thank you.
discussed.
I get the benefit of the open concept of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't you, you just
Oh,
threw gas. You just threw gas.
I'm
He's
sorry,
been so
Phil.
good.
I'm sorry.
Open that up. You're punching the bear?
Pardon me?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
One question about special ed, I don't know if you can answer this. How many are we short teachers?
If you
Special ed.
give me a minute, I can let you know,
Okay.
exact figure.
I'm just wondering, we got 6 special ed supervisors that we increased, so we keep those, right? So
Yes.
that's an incentive.
And also, don't forget, on the counselor side, we did actually add those elementary life counselors specifically for those Title I schools, just to kind of just remind us of that too, in terms of extra. Not saying they don't need more, but we did.
Well, just,
do some
here,
additional.
So they already have how many?
let me simplify it. How many do they have
Title
at
I.
Green Valley?
Life counselors?
Yes.
None.
So you're
How
out
many do they
business
have
owner.
at Condiff?
One.
The one.
So we've got one where they don't have any at Green Valley. How many counselors do they have? Now, let's not do semantics. Let's, how many counselors?
Elementary
Yes.
school? School counselor, for school counselors, they have one.
Correct, every school has one, Green Valley has 1.5. And then we have the
And now we've
6
got one
life
at
counselors.
You've got the school counselor at Condiff plus the life counselor.
So we've
Is
got
that right?
2, and
That's
they've got
correct, yes,
1.5.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
But if you get 5 more students, you could,
Get a- I get a
you could
third
get a
one.
BOGO.
It's unbelievable.
You got it.
I'm just trying to throw some humor in there.
Hey, I appreciate it.
We have 5 openings right now.
5
Yes, sir.
special ed openings.
BOGO.
English,
Give me a minute. I have my chart board open.
maybe I shouldn't be asking.
Remaining timeline, Ms.
Um,
Peterson?
So the remaining timeline, the 2 items that I had specifically discussed bringing to you for consent agenda at the next meeting will be the ARPA grants, and then there's a couple of pay plan changes in that last slide that we discussed quite lengthy. So then we just got to step back and say, what's still needed to get a revised budget? Well, we need county revenue. We don't have that yet. They don't know what that is yet. They're working on that, and they have let me know that they do expect our revenue sharing formula to produce additional revenue, because remember with the grocery tax, they didn't put any grocery tax into their estimates. But now that they're gonna get some grocery tax, that's gonna come back in, just like you saw it came back in for us. And so they do expect to see some additional funds that may be helpful to us coming down the pike. So that'll be, when we come back, that short list, we'll be able to start checking off some of those additional items on that short list.
What will the additional, well, you don't know, real estate, since real estate taxes were up?
I don't know the additional impact.
I mean, we gotta have something from that.
Well, I mean,
Overall.
they did estimate, and we got some additional.
Yeah, but that, we don't know for sure, exactly.
I mean, I could pull up.
That's all right, that's all right.
We just have what they
Sorry,
gave
I
us
don't-
back in.
You'll have it,
I
I
don't-
guess.
I don't
When we
keep
get-
those
When
specifics in
everything
my
washes
brain.
out, I guess we'll have a number.
Yeah, and they're saying they're not gonna give us revised numbers locally until July.
Right.
Yeah. So then, hopefully, what's gonna happen next is we will review all of the county revenue, all of the state revenue, and come up with our final budget, bring it to you for your approval, take it to the county board of supervisors, and present the revised budget to them to approve. They will advertise for a public hearing, since the revision is gonna be over like 10% of the fund balance or something. They have very specific rules about that for their ordinances. And then they will adopt an ordinance for additional funds. So that's kind of what's coming down the pike. We were, I just have to say, the timing was uncanny, because Ms. Owens and I literally had breakfast, and we had come up with that schedule that I shared with you at the last meeting of, well, we're gonna make this work, and we're gonna get the public hearing document in on the 16th, and we're gonna adopt in these dates, and we had everything lined out, and she had it lined out on her side, and we had it lined out over here. And then literally that afternoon, the governor said, oh, I've got it on my desk. I have a week to look at it.
Right.
So that just blew everything out of the water for us, and unfortunately,
The best laid plans.
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I do have
Yes.
one additional question. Going back to the General Assembly budget, for the governor and then for the House and General Assembly, it looks like 5.6 million school construction grants. That's not, and somebody in here that's more in tune with politics maybe can help me, but that's not construction funds, that's just grants.
So that would be, I've got a very specific slide in the next presentation on this.
Okay.
But what it's gonna be, it's one-time money that can be used for a one-time need for construction.
And obviously, the reason I'm asking it, if we're looking, because we've been told to look for funds that are coming from the state for construction, 5.6 million, and we're talking about 80 for BCAT. I mean, if that's construction dollars, now it might be grants that get you services, engineering services or something, but the point is, we're not getting a golden parachute coming from the state. Right,
Yeah.
okay. I just want to make sure, okay.
It's a drop
They're
in the
doing
bucket.
some, but,
Yeah, right.
sorry.
Because, I mean, that's a whole state, 5.6.
No, that was our
That would be our-
Oh, is that our
Yeah, that's our
portion?
portion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the 5.6
Okay.
was the
Then that's a little
December
different.
governor's budget. What just came out from the General Assembly is 4.3
It's
million.
gonna be 4.3.
So
Okay.
it's 4.3 is what we're looking at.
And that's one time,
Obtaining.
so you couldn't use it for debt service.
Okay.
So, I mean,
So we do, okay, so that's
but
our
that,
portion.
that could
But
reduce
compared to VCAT, 80 million.
Yeah, it's still,
what your down
It's not gonna
payment
fund
might
everything.
be.
But it's gonna buy you some land.
Yes.
yeah, I mean, that's, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I
All
didn't
right.
realize that was just.
Any other questions? Item 2.02, discussion for planning and funding for capital projects. Dr. Nicely and Ms. Peterson.
Right. So I know you are all privy to Ms. Owen's PowerPoint, so I'm not necessarily going to go over that. But I do have some thoughts from the school side, and Dr. Nicely, please jump in wherever you see fit. So I want to look at currently what are we contributing for our capital projects to the county, possible additional cash that we can come up with, additional state funds, so it's going back to that 4.3 million, and then take a quick look at the capital improvement plan, and I'll show you, I have made no changes to the capital improvement plan, but I will show you what I interpret Ms. Owen's comments to mean, so that then you can provide me guidance as to if you want any changes to the CIP. So we have three main ways that we contribute to capital costs: the joint financing agreement, debt payments, and the CMP. So as you know, in the current year, we have set aside 2.9 million. This gets us the 17-17-17 plan, where we're helping to put away money for future capital. This is a joint agreement with the county. The one thing about this is, so at the beginning of this, and I have my dates wrong, I've got the FY22, I got my years mixed up, that's actually FY23, is the 2.9 million. So the FY22 joint financing agreement was the 2.6 million. We added for FY23, 300,000. And for FY23, we're gonna have a total of 2.9 that we're giving money back to the county for this program. The 300,000 will be added every single year. So every year, next year, for the 24 budget, we'll start with 2.9, and we'll add 300,000 to that. And then the year after that, we'll just add 300,000. So every year, one of the first add backs to the budget will be 300,000. And this was agreed upon by both parties. So that's 2.9
For how
million.
long?
Hmm?
For how many years?
For a very long time. I don't have an end date from Ms. Owens.
So this is we've already agreed to that. is what
Correct.
you're saying, yeah.
Correct. And that's already built into the budget. So then the other part that's built in the budget is we have a financing agreement with the county where we are paying for about 2.3 million of our own debt service. Back in 2009, we went outside of the agreement to issue additional debt for those, I think they were the Blue Ribbon projects. Our debt service payments for that is 1.8 million. That will end in 2029. So we can just tell the county, we won't stop provide, that's a painless way to continue to provide those funds for future capital, right? Instead of that 1.8 million coming back into our budget where we could use it for other things, it's already set aside for capital, and we can just leave that in there, starting with after 2029.
So 1.8, 2029, 2030, 2031.
So if you take the 4.1 and the 2.9, that's the total amount of transfer that we give back to the county to help fund capital projects. The CMP I had in there, but I didn't put a slide in here. That's $1 million that is a part of the financing agreement with the county. They took it out of the transfer to the county, and we just transfer that to our capital fund so that we can do major capital CMP projects. So additional possible cash, we do right now, after you take away the 600,000 that we put towards the CIP next year, we do have 2.3 million sitting in major capital. This is from prior year carryover balances. And it also includes, I think, about 700,000 of cash from the Cave Spring High bond project, the interest from that. So that's all a part of the major capital. So we do have that sitting to the side. It's been on the capital reserve report that you get every month. We can also consider, when we go back to the priority list, setting aside a few extra dollars from our operating fund to give back to the county for additional debt service. We always put part of our carryover, 50%, has to go into the major capital fund at the end of every year, and then the other 50% can go into minor capital. One of the items on the presentation that Ms. Owens gave was that the county is recommending we give $5 million at the end of 22, and then we give $5 million again at the end of 23 of surplus into specifically for the BCAP project. I have concerns about that. I don't know that we're gonna have $5 million. Right now, we're looking at only a 1.8 million surplus in 22 for personnel. Now, I don't know about revenue because I have not been able to get a new calc tool from the county, from the state. They give us some numbers, but not all of the numbers to be able to determine exactly how much revenue surplus we will have. I do expect we're gonna have some. I don't know if it's gonna be enough to get up to the 5 million that they're asking for. So that's one concern that I have. Another concern is, are we gonna get to 5 million in 23? We just built a budget and
Added a lot of cost.
we did add a lot of payroll.
Payroll, right.
And we really, I don't wanna say, I hate the term cut the fat, but we pushed the envelope as much as we could to build in the highest percent increase that we could for our employees, because that is what you wanna do. You wanna give as much back to our employees as possible. So I don't know that we're gonna have a huge personnel surplus at the end of next year in 23 to be able to say right now, yeah, we'll give you 5 million. I don't know that it's gonna be there. So the other thing is,
That would eat up every bit of our surplus pretty much, both, I mean, even if we do have 5 next year. Yeah, I think they need to take that part off the table, but.
so here's that CMP transfer. You know, back in the short list, I had the $580,143 on the short list. If we don't build that into the budget going forward, that's gonna have to be one of our first set-asides. And so that's gonna come off the top, right? So somehow we're gonna have to pay for it, whether it's up front or at the end of the day.
One question. You know, you talked about maybe additional funds going over for debt, but it doesn't change our 17. It just stays the way unless you're reducing your debt in some ways, right?
We would have to have that conversation with Ms. Owens to see if, how she could structure the debt service and with any additional funds that we could send over there.
Okay.
And then, so may not be able to replenish capital reserves. So this next slide, this is what our capital reserves is gonna look like to begin the next year. Right now, we've got 1.4 million sitting in minor capital. We are looking at, Mr. Lowe has a presentation. I looked at his costs in there earlier. To do the bare minimum, we're looking at setting aside another $97,357 for fencing. If we wanted to add the additional optional costs, then you're gonna have to add to the spending and take away from minor capital, $64,988. I was made aware today that the mobile classrooms that we are setting up did not have the technology costs built in, so it's about $15,000 per trailer. So we're gonna have to use that out of minor capital reserves. So that brings us down to 1.1 million. Well, then if we look at what we set aside next year, we're gonna get a little bit of revenue in there. But we did set aside the playground money. And so holding back the playground money next year, we're looking at having only $500,000 by the time we allocate the playground money next year. And so I have grave concerns that we will be running out of funds and we're not gonna have a way to replenish them if we put 100% of our year-end surplus only to BCAT and the first two elementary schools. I just think that's something you need to think about when we have these discussions.
It's unrealistic. You can't
That's
keep
the
taking
usual-
from education.
The usual year-end reserve, or the reserves that we have to start a year is what, 1.5 million? Minor capital?
Well,
think it's-
it'll be
It always
that.
it always just comes out of our year-end surplus, right?
So what we do is, at the end of the year, that'll roll over to next year, and then you take whatever the general fund surplus is, and 50% goes straight into major capital right here, and then whatever is left over, typically we would want to put it all in the minor capital reserves, but if there was a need to put it into fleet or technology, we have that option as well.
Did that answer your question?
Well enough, yes.
In other words, we don't have anything in the operating budget that transfers over, it's all replenished out of the year-end.
And this year, you're projecting 1.8.
But that's only the personnel surplus that we looked at the last time we ran it. I do not know what the revenue surplus is gonna look like. So it may be more. I mean, heck, we may
But
end
if
up
you
with a
dropped
lot.
in-
I
Yeah.
just don't know at this
But if you
point.
just used 1.8, you'd put half of that in minor capital, right? And then half in major.
Major.
That would be
more
what we
significant.
typically would do, but the county's asking us to give it
Well-
all to major capital into the
They can ask.
project.
If we have a major issue, you just don't want to have that little amount.
Yep.
I mean, just, you don't want to have to go to the county just for money for something that big has happened.
This is where that 17, 17, 17, they're just being extremely generous, but they're expecting us to do it out of ours.
Sorry, I feel like
Any
I'm
other
full of
questions?
gloom and doom.
Oh,
So,
but but you also, you don't know for sure what we're gonna get, so.
Yeah, I don't.
It may be a little more, better picture,
But let's say we get 5 million.
yeah. They want it,
We're gonna give them 5 million?
they want 5 million.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how that works, because our costs always go up. So, moving forward, I just think it's unrealistic, but, hey, we knew this when we accepted 17, 17, 17. So,
all right, so looking at our additional state money, the 4.3 million from the governor's, or from the General Assembly budget, so that is related to the $400 million school construction grant program entitlement that they have set aside. We will have to apply for these funds, but for this pot of money, they have already calculated that we will be eligible for 4.3 million. It is for non-recurring funds for construction additions, infrastructure, site acquisitions, renovations, technology, modernizing classrooms, and you can use it for debt service as well. What you cannot spend it on is parking lots and facilities used for extracurricular athletic activities. But I think the long and short of it is, if we apply and we can get the 4.3 million, I think the all intents purposes is that would go towards BCAT.
When do you know you get that?
We're gonna have to apply
When
next
would-
year.
Okay. But we
But if-
don't know when we would know if we were awarded.
I don't know that right now.
Yeah.
Did we use that as our first 5 million?
Oh,
No. Oh, back to the
Yeah.
county?
I think they're not necessarily thinking of that as
Oh, I'm
cash.
sure they're not, but
Yeah.
I think that's what.
Because they're
we're
looking at
proposing.
these separate as well.
But the way this was presented, we do have to apply, but it was presented in such a way that, it's not, maybe it's pretty much a guarantee that we would get it, and, unless something, sky falls in, so. It doesn't sound like something, they would come back and say, well, we're already gonna give you half of that, or something like that, so that's some good news.
Okay.
Yeah, I would feel comfortable that we would probably get the 4.3 million. Now, the second pot of money, they have 450 million set aside in the school construction assistant program, and that is one that they have not divvied out and allocated to schools. That schools literally will have to apply, like, come up with a project and apply for it, and then based on the wealth of our school division and the needs presented in the project itself, then they will go through and determine how much we would get out of that. So that's a whole separate program. There's two big programs going along.
Can you repeat that last bit? That was important. So there's this, and then there's another thing that we might be able to capture.
So
Is that just
these
like-
are two different grant programs.
Right,
So the
okay.
first one is the 4.3 million that I feel comfortable that we're gonna
We'll
get.
get, okay.
And the second one is the grant program that we would have to apply for a specific project. And it really has qualifiers on it based on the wealth of the county and the project itself and the school that we are renovating and the.
Or the programs that you're building,
Yes.
technology. And who's working on that right now?
It's not even, I don't even think the DOE has anything
Defined.
built out that we can start to use.
Okay.
But as soon as we do, Mr. Cables and I will be very close friends, working through all of this to ensure that we get what we need.
Okay.
Having sat in on last Thursday's Board of Supervisors work session, that it's gonna be important that we are ready to go, because it sounds like this first year, they're gonna do it in two separate years, and we need to be ready when that is available.
And we'll keep our eyes out.
Is there a distinctive between the word grant versus assistance? In other words, that second pot of money, is that possible, low interest loans versus an outright grant, or do we know?
I think they're both outright grants.
Yes,
Okay.
that was my
But
understanding.
I think the second grant is like, they'll grant you up to, there's one little piece that says up to like 20% of the costs.
Right.
Is that similar to?
That was
you're-
what I understood, which could result in $16 million,
Right.
if it's an $80 million project.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. So we'll
And the
definitely-
umbrella would have to fall under, would probably be technology, because that's the big push right now out of the General Assembly.
I think we need to get them to take that 10 million, and if we can get that, that would be 20 right there. Because let's be honest, it's gonna be unrealistic for us to give 5 million each year.
Yeah, this year might be a little easier. I'm very much with her on next year,
Mhm.
because that is gonna be very difficult
Well,
to
if we give
predict.
5 million this year, that's about all we're gonna have.
So then, to get into the, and this is really, really small, so you're gonna have to really look at your pages. So it was my understanding that when Ms. Owens went through and was kind of looking at the debt and what would be possible, that it is important for us to understand that they're looking at possibly, if we can pull it all together, issuing the debt in the year 2025, the fiscal year of 2025. And so then I'll try and show you up here. So it's my understanding that like, when they're looking, they're pulling in these four, they're kind of collapsing them together, and they're kind of looking at all three of these projects together. And then they're gonna give us $4 million from their current 23 pot that they're not gonna use. And so those pieces added together, plus all of the cash that they expect, they're expecting us to have 92 million so that we could issue debt in this year. So I know that there is concern with when this project would start, and it certainly couldn't start if we issue the debt in 25. We would have to, and we have to consider, if we do the bid build or the bid, oh, correct me, I'm saying this wrong. Design.
Bid, build, or design build.
Thank you. So it depends on when we get started, because, if you do the design bid build, you do your architect fees up front, and then, so you can use some cash and start a little bit of the drafting early, where if you don't go that route and you do design build, sorry, I always get those mixed up, then you really kind of have to wait until a little bit later to get started on that.
You slid that in just for me, didn't you?
You bet so.
Because the 25 would be, not only would we not start in 23, and they said, oh, but we can start in 24, but really, no, we can't. We're gonna start in 25. I'm
That
telling
would be
you what.
2 years from now, though.
Well, there you go.
2 years from,
The shell game continues.
That was my understanding reading.
I agree with you. I don't think there's any chance we start in the next 2 years. We just push everything out. And then that would include the 2 elementary schools, which get pushed out even further.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because they were thinking we could do all of them. I don't know.
With 92 million, that's a good squeeze.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, debt service on that.
I'm telling you.
But was there some thought, I expressed at the meeting that you attended, Mr. Linden, that somehow a PPEA approach might somehow do that, but then, I think that's something we have to wrap our heads around in terms of exactly what, how that would really help us.
yes, yeah, they were very hopeful that if we did this 2 years from now, we're breaking ground, July 1 of 24, 25 year, the 25 budget year.
So July 1 of 24.
Yes.
What did you say, Ken, the PP something?
The public-private partnership arrangement, so the idea typically is that, we own the land for a project, an outside person, the private side of that, offers to build something for us, and then we lease it back from them over time is the basic principle. I think there's a lot of questions. We've never done that before as a school system. I don't think there's very many school systems in Virginia that have. I think
Other
we need to do some-
states.
We need to do some homework and research into that in terms of if that is truly a vehicle, what does that really look like and how does that really help us?
So was that brought up at the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because they are doing that in South Carolina, North
Yes.
Carolina.
And that's how the county built the public safety building as well as the Green Ridge Center. So they have some experience with this, I know.
I think it's a great idea.
It's worked well.
And I think
Yeah.
though that when, in speaking with Ms. Owens, that they didn't use the PPEA for financing, they used that for the construction piece. But on the financing side, she still got the regular GO bonds. And for us, we would get the DPSA bonds.
So is that what they're suggesting and we're going with, or do you know, or is that just on the
a
table?
talking point,
A talking
yes.
point, okay.
Yeah,
An option.
we are elected separate from them, so it's our decision how we do that. And we want to do what's best educationally for our kids, and also keeping in mind the constituents for, the tax dollars and so forth. So while they have their ideas, we still are our own autonomous group to make those decisions. So-
Yeah, and if we could afford, if it gets to be a PPE situation where you could pay the lease.
Yeah. So it's almost like, and this is a very simplistic approach, but there's a reason that copy companies have leased copiers. They make a fortune off of it. you pay for that copier about 4 times over 4 or 5 years. Whereas if you bought it and you financed it, you would pay a much different price up front, and you'd pay for it in a year or so, or 2 years. Not the same with a building. That's why I say it's a much simpler approach, but.
Just gives you a chance to get the building built, and then you pay more on the back end.
Yeah, pay a fortune for it.
Like I said, I feel like we need to do a lot more research and homework on that to really fully understand. One of the big questions I would have is just, in terms of our ability to retain some level of design control in a school that would really truly satisfy any needs and concerns we have related to safety and security. That's a huge question that I have, but I'll say that I definitely need to do a lot more homework and research into it.
Here's all you need to know about it, in my mind. Are private companies doing it?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, they are,
absolutely.
because Jason
Give us-
Peters was discussing that.
Yep.
He's doing a lot of it
I
down in North Carolina,
South Carolina.
South
South
Carolina.
Same schools David and Phil went to. Yeah. So, yeah, but I'm telling you, give us some successful private industries that are doing that. And I think you'll have your answer.
Okay.
So as far, I do want to know if you want me to change our CIP right now, or leave it, or if there's any desire,
Change it for what?
I don't know.
I think it's just a,
The only other option really, and I'm just gonna flip that out there, is putting BCAT ahead of the other two projects, Tim, which I know you're not gonna
you
like.
absolutely can do it. I will
Yeah.
never vote for it.
Yeah, I know you wouldn't, but just, that is a consideration to move that to the top
And that would
of
make the Board of
list.
Supervisors happy. So let's cater to them. But to me,
Well, is it possible to even do all three projects at once, you think, in terms of equipment and labor and construction materials?
well, let's, what is most important? Do our kids at those two open elementary schools deserve the same educational situations, opportunities, ramifications that all the other 14 schools deserve? Or should we say, nope, you're okay, we can push you down to about 2029, and then we'll look at it again?
I'm just playing a devil's advocate here.
I get it,
That's all I am.
and I'm playing Vinton.
Yeah,
And so,
Well, and
and
then
I
what's-
hope Brent is playing Catawba. And I hope David's somewhere in the midst of all this.
well,
will
I'm
have some
playing for
clarity.
everybody. Honestly, I'm playing for everybody. I'd like to see everybody win. Not your district, my district, that district.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, I'd like
It's,
to see it.
but it's
Win-win
when the
for
other
everybody.
districts are winning, and then we say, well, now it's your turn, let's play nice.
So, in the past, have things that have been on the list always stayed that way on the list, or have things moved around?
Things have moved.
I can speak to that briefly. About 3 years ago, I'm trying to think, it was my first year as superintendent, the board asked me to conduct, we had some previous outside consultant studies done in terms of facilities, in terms of looking at infrastructure and things like that. But the board at the time wanted us to look at all of the buildings that had not been renovated, primarily like through an instructional lens. So we took all of those studies and, knowledge about, where the infrastructure was, looked at instructional considerations, talked to the principals and that kind of thing. And that's when this particular order was developed at that time, was through that lens. And just to give you an example, believe it or not, prior to us doing that, neither Burton nor Northside Middle were even on the list. So I can't speak to reasons for why that was, but I do know that was the case. So with this revamped list, it was, those two schools now made it on the list, and it was really kind of trying to do that comprehensive look from a staff professional standpoint, and again, really, from an instructional lens kind of point of view, is what we kind of brought to the table. And so the last time the board really looked at this and adopted the current priority was when we did that 3 years ago.
And other than, prior to that, it did bump around quite a bit, unfortunately.
I'm not really sure. You might know more of the, I don't know, because I wasn't.
Oh, you mean the
held involved.
projects?
Yeah, in terms of the priority list, how often did it change? I really
Well, you look at
just don't know.
prior.
Prior boards
anything.
did different things.
Yeah.
I mean, William Byrd got jumped up above a few things. I mean, it had been third or fourth.
Well, yeah, William Byrd High School is not on the list because when we did it, yes, that was the first priority, and that was just from the standpoint of,
It
you know,
never
there was
got
this,
done.
well, there was this
Anyway.
conception that, you know, it had been renovated and really it hadn't been, so it was not on par with the other high schools, and so that's why we put that as the first project and then went from there.
Well, and additionally, we saw that the locker rooms,
The whole school was
Terrible.
like a
Yeah,
third
there's a lot of
world country.
band-aided kind of
and I
stuff
think
done
we
over
did $1
time.
million on those
Yeah.
because
It did.
they were subpar.
Tim's obviously never been to a third world country.
Well,
I look at this, I mean,
Go to
1962
Southwest Virginia. Have you been
is,
there?
Burton was built in 62. It's 10 years older than Glen Cove and Cundiff. I personally we are so close, I feel, with the Board of Supervisors to being able to get a new CTE center done and the economic and workforce development that will come with that. And the needs have changed a little bit in the community for that. We've got a lot of businesses. This committee that we've put together has so much energy and enthusiasm right now. I would like to see BCAT moved up to the number one on our CIP. And with the hopes that the Board of Supervisors will be able to fund all three projects at the same time. Whether or not they can be built with manpower and things like that at the same time, I think moving BCAT to number one on the CIP is an important aspect to seeing that the CTE center gets built.
And King Phil
sooner.
should be happy with you at that point. So that's what I would do.
I see David's point, and I think it would support our entire community.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. It's gotta be
It's
done.
it's got to
There's no
be done. I mean,
question.
we're just,
But not at the expense of other schools not being done too.
And I think that we have, BCAT has evolved over time. Used to, we didn't have any apprenticeships, it wasn't anything. And then they started listening to the businesses and saying, hey, we need a workforce. If we're gonna keep the kids here, we need a workforce. And I think that's attributed to Kristen and all the folks that are involved in BCAT and Jason, that they have brought this along and involved these people. And so then they're looking to us now for this workforce. And I think that's, an importance that we, certainly have to look at now, how much will the county, be involved in this or not, I don't know.
Ms. Johnson?
Well, my fear is we could be heading into a recession and it could heavily affect the revenues that we're going to be getting. And that bothers me more than anything. I mean, if we're looking a year or two out, things don't look good right now.
I guess, I guess we also have to look forward and see how far we can go. And, is the unknown out there, are we gonna stop? I don't know.
If we're gonna try to get, in my opinion, if we're gonna try to get that kind of money from them, it needs to be,
Yeah, they won't give it to us if we leave it in the third position. They'll probably not give it to us.
we're saying it's not the most important thing that we want to do right now. So where would the urgency on their end be?
Then you cave. I knew this was coming at some point, so you cave and let's move on. I'm good with it. We can tell those other two schools. What I would say is, let's put in 10 million and let's fix these other two schools so that they're not open concept schools. It should have been done 20 years ago. We're no different than any other sector of the county. Our kids ought to have the same educational opportunity that they have in the other parts of the county. And it should be done. There shouldn't be a question. Why do our kids sit in an open concept classroom and everybody else's kids except for Brent and I
Sorry.
Tim, that was a direct
that for
response
Tim?
to you, by the
Time
way.
to go,
Everybody's got a direct
That is,
Time for you to go.
time to go home.
I can vouch that Ms. Peterson does have that alarm sounder.
Time to go home.
I didn't hear what it said, but it doesn't matter.
Time to go home.
She has her alarm set for
I
her to go.
agree. I mean,
Well,
it's,
honestly,
but in the bigger picture, it is an economic driver. BCAT is what's gonna be for an economy, and everything that we have going on right now, all signs point to that's what we need to do.
okay, economic driver over kids' education.
No, it's not, but it's the
Yeah,
kids
sure
in the,
it
lo-
is. That's
no,
what we're
it's not,
saying.
Tim, I disagree.
Well,
It's-
I
it's
think
just-
that there may be a compromise, and you
Maybe-
said it.
Yeah, maybe we do.
You said maybe we can enclose those until we
Find
can do a
a
full
short-term
renovation, a
solution.
full
I'm
build.
good with that, give us 10 million.
A
Let's
full
close
build, a
those
full
classrooms and
build.
move on.
I don't know what it would
We'll do
cost.
exactly what they said, just throw up some walls, that'll
No,
take care
well,
of it.
you're not listening. I'm trying to say, you know, if we could, what would it cost to do that in the meantime? To get rid of the, you know, open classroom concept, you know, what it might entail.
Ask
don't know.
Dr. Nicely, he's the expert.
If we wait long enough, open concept might just come
Oh,
back.
absolutely, that's what we should do, that's what we normally do with, I mean, we thought, William Byrd, to your point, November 15 of 2015, I come into a meeting, the first meeting on this board, 2015, and we're doing a 10-year CIP, and the only thing we had on it was Cave Spring High School. And then they were talking about the other projects that need to be done. I said, all right, so we put 30 million in Cave Spring Middle School. We've renovated all, at doing Cave Spring High School.
And that was the last high school that
That's
we were
right.
renovating.
Well, no, it wasn't the last one, because we haven't done Byrd.
Well, no,
the
but I
point
mean,
is,
it was the last one on the project. I
list,
mean,
right. And
because it
needed
didn't
to be
get
done.
done years ago, that's
Absolutely.
some other,
It needed to be done.
Board's problem.
I agree,
Okay.
it needed to be
Well,
done.
Cave Spring High School needed to be done. I mean,
Absolutely, it was a dump.
yeah.
And it was, and so we did it.
Big
But-
Cat's about as close
But
as you can
Byrd
get
was
to someone
nowhere in
right now.
sight, nowhere in sight, and at that point, that's where we incorporated.
Yeah, we did.
Started walking people through, started showing them that it had to be done. Even Ms. Owens said in a public meeting, well, you know, we renovated in 2010. We put offices in it, we didn't renovate it. So now I come back to today, and I'm telling you, I'm ready to get off this board as quick as y'all want to kick me off this board. But I've got Cundiff, we actually, Cove was down to like fourth position, and we added it up because it's an open concept class. So now I come back to this spot again, and I have fought like hell to get it close to the top of the list. And with Dr. Nicely's staff agreeing that those classrooms had to be. Once you push it down, and I'm no longer here, I don't know who comes in behind me, but that school may not get done. Y'all will Band-Aid it and move on.
Well, I'm not saying Band-Aid
That's
it, but
exactly-
are we gonna put it, you know, are we gonna do something to try to enclose those two schools? And we don't know what the cost will be. Maybe it'd be something that we could do it, and they'd stay still in the mix. That's the way I see it.
Those kids are eventually gonna go to BCAT too. I mean,
Well.
they will.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely
and
they
that's
will.
the point that I think we're missing. Is,
I don't disagree. Look, I have fought
Tim,
like,
you've said from the very beginning, you
I fought
wanna
like
get
heck for
BCAT built.
BCAT. Absolutely. But we can't do it on the backs of, we can't push everything. I've told y'all this. This was coming. I've told you this from the beginning. They're gonna give us that 17, 17, 17, woo-hoo! Look what we've given you, and expect us to pay for it. And we can't do it and keep the structural integrity of the other buildings. Can't be done. But yet, you're willing, and here we go. Let's do
Well,
it.
I'll tell you what, when the 17 was agreed upon, we didn't have the economy that we have right now, did we?
No.
Or the inflation. I mean, it's too bad it's not 21, 21, 21 at this point, because we don't, first you have to service the debt, but I mean, it's just, everything's getting, what used to be $1 is worth way less now, so we're in
Well,
trouble.
and so y'all will hear me bellyache from now on, so you better just go on and vote it up there and scoot the other ones down and let them put them, and be realistic. What good is that as a budget tool if you're not realistic? Move Cundiff and Cove back to 29. or whatever it's gonna be for those to start. Be realistic. That's what the tool should be for accounting, is realistic. Put it where it should be, if that's what you're gonna do. But don't just put them up there and say, oh, yeah, they're there.
What is required to alter the CIP or to change the CIP?
Well, I can change it and bring it back to you for approval, if that's what you want, or for consideration, or for informational purposes, however you want to.
For consideration, I think. I'd like to see that. Anybody else?
If it meant moving it up sooner, Tim, would that, and then those wouldn't be too much further behind?
Well, I mean,
Is
look,
that,
the
is that
kids.
acceptable? I
Yeah.
know it's not, nothing
It's not your
isn't.
fault, trust me, I'm not
It's
being
just, I
mad.
want to get it done, I want to get it done
Yeah.
sooner than later, and the Board of Supervisors wants us to do it, and I just feel like if we don't put the pedal to the metal, it's never going to get done.
No, I get, look, we wouldn't be at this point if
It's
if
just-
we hadn't brought it
Just
to them.
banging your head against the wall day
But
in and day out.
but we can't let them, I mean, and I'm saying this, I don't care, we can't continue to let them drive us. At some point, we have to stand up as a board and say, educationally, this is where we're at, and this is where we need to be. Those two open concept classrooms, y'all wouldn't accept them in Cave Spring, Hidden Valley, or Northside. You wouldn't do it. And why should we accept that? That's all I'm saying. Just,
Well-
but leave me out of the conversation, because you know where I stand, and let's move on. Vote it in, put it up front, and I agree absolutely, 1,000,000% it needs to be done. But it shouldn't be done on the backs of the other schools.
Well,
Should not be.
you know, and that's where I said, why can't we get at least a price to see what we can do to enclose those at this point and still not bump it up, but still have BCAT, but still have those two, some type of monies to close those in. And that's all they did at Penn Forest. They didn't close it in. You got kids walking through classrooms to get to other classrooms.
And Glen Elementary.
Put us
Huh?
a-
And
yeah,
Glen-
Yep, yeah, they have to
well,
cut
put us
through.
about
So they-
8 or 10
you know,
trailers
all they
out there,
did-
We should be fine.
All they did was close it, but maybe that's a fixed until we can do the full.
You're talking about
Re-
500
bill.
kids that are in about a 400-kid building. And that's what you have. to
Well, I'm
do.
just saying, if that's something we could get at least a price on to see how much that would be.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
don't-
Again,
and
having-
I agree with Mike, I mean, I don't want to put a Band-Aid on anything, but sometimes we got to compromise a little bit maybe, or figure something out so we can get it done sooner than later.
Well,
And
next
maybe that
time-
is a solution, I know you don't want to hear that.
No, it's okay,
And-
because as I see, we don't have, anyway, screw it. Whatever, y'all do whatever you want to do.
And it doesn't end
Because I'm gonna
here.
keep making
It
y'all
doesn't end
mad.
here.
It doesn't
We're
end
just-
here because Northside Middle,
Well, that's
That's
it.
another one that
6 of 8 of those
could use
schools
a
are
whole
in
lot
our
of-
3 districts.
Right.
Okay? So if we're okay with moving it down, so Northside Middle, Glenver, Hidden Valley, they'll get done in the 30s, late 30s.
Hidden Valley Middle's never going to get done.
Yeah, it's not
I
gonna
agree with
happen.
you.
So just.
We just
if
need the
you're-
General Assembly to give us more money, right?
Yeah, that's right, we need a money tree. But if y'all are okay with those, just leave them down there. They'll get done in 30s and 40s.
Did your alarm go off again?
I'll be dead when they're done.
Did it go off? Is there a
I
spike
would
button?
Can you
retired by
make that
40.
go off again?
Yeah, that's not. gonna
All
work.
right,
If we could, just to see what it looks like, and then we'll have that discussion. I guess,
Do you want it for the next meeting or in July?
Just do it now. Just do it now. What are you waiting on? Just do it.
That's
I would
nice.
Are you
like-
guys-
I would like to have more conversation.
Yeah, I don't want to do it that way,
Um,
Tim. I don't want everybody to get.
Like honestly, yeah,
Yeah.
to make an educated decision, I would like to kind of talk to each of you one-on-one and kind of get your opinions and form my own versus just me blindly making a decision. So I would much rather,
Well, and you know what, maybe if this public-private thing
Partnership.
works out, we will have enough money to do it all. I mean,
and that was certainly something that David Radford had pushed, and he was hopeful that maybe all three, funding for all three could come in at the same time.
Is he leasing a building for his company?
we're gonna have to
You'd have
figure
to-
out
All
a
right,
way to
let's
get it
move
all
on.
done.
All right, put that together, and we'll look at it at the July meeting, and we'll have time to talk about it.
So right now,
Not a July work session,
right, I mean, there could be one. Right now, the only thing scheduled in July is the regular
school board
board
meeting,
meeting, yes, sir.
correct.
Okay.
It's the 23rd or something.
We can look
like
at that.
Yeah. let's pick a date later.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Proposal from the sheriff's office. Item 2.03, Dr. Nicely.
I'll get the conversation started. And just,
Do I get to weigh in again?
Didn't you hear her phone go off?
Time to go home.
I need that alarm.
one second.
Do I get a limit on the amount of time I get to speak?
Aren't you gonna go to Alaska?
You've already used your limit. What do you mean?
I know.
We missed him, didn't we?
Oh, geez, I'm sure it was a much quicker meeting, yeah.
I'm gonna pay for him to go for 2 months
Yeah.
next time.
Can we pay you to go on another cruise?
Look, I'll make y'all a deal. Y'all get Cundiff done, I'll leave the board. Y'all
No,
put
we want
somebody,
you on the
put
board.
somebody else in here.
We really do like you, Tim, just so you know.
So, just to kind of get the conversation started, I asked Mr. Hudson to provide some of the details, given his other role, when not on the school board, but kind of put on both hats, has brought to us on behalf of Sheriff Orange a proposal that will help us enhance what we currently have in terms of safety and security. Just in terms of background, what we currently have in terms of SROs, and by the way, we as a school district, and I say this out loud just because there are, places in Virginia, places across the country that have sort of over the last couple of years, asked to rethink, the presence of SROs in our schools. We affirm, we want SROs, and we think they're invaluable to the safety and security of our schools, and just are really appreciative of not only what the police department provides on that front, but also the way the sheriff's office has stepped up over the last couple of years to enhance that, and has brought this proposal today. So, currently, what we have in terms of our amended MOU between the police department as well as the sheriff's office is the sheriff's office is providing 2 full-time deputy SROs who circulate among our elementary schools. They currently pay the salary for those SRO deputies, their vehicle, their equipment, which is at a considerable expense. And so I just want to acknowledge what that contribution is. In addition to that, with our major school construction projects, we kind of started this a couple of years ago, and in terms of when we have a lot of mobile units outside of schools, adding a second SRO in our schools. We did that at Cave Spring High School, and then we've continued that at Byrd High School. In order to have that second SRO, the sheriff's office has provided the person in terms of a law enforcement certified individual who's been trained with SRO schooling, because they have to have special training in order to do that. They're providing the equipment for that, the vehicle. We reimburse the sheriff's office the cost of the salary for that. And so at a basic level, and again, I'll ask Mr. Hudson to kind of fill in some of the details, because he's basically put this together, is the proposal is that the sheriff's office would help us recruit some additional part-time deputy or SRO deputies at a cost of $25.02 per hour, using law enforcement certified folks, but who are retired, but could come back on a part-time basis and help us out with that. They've offered to pay for the equipment to equip those SRO deputies at a cost to the sheriff's office of about $36,000. And what we would do under this proposal is, again, reimburse the sheriff's office the cost of the salary, which comes in at about $101,000 plus the FICA. I think the total is about $108,000 is what Ms. Peterson showed on a previous slide. So that's sort of the big picture idea in a nutshell, and Mr. Hudson can be so
One
kind to
question
fill in
before
some
you get
details.
started. Does that include the car?
No, and that's one thing we need to talk about.
Okay.
And I spoke to one of the board of supervisors about that, and my hope is that maybe they'll come through on that, because we don't have additional cars for these individuals.
Do they have surplus?
That's what I proposed when I spoke to the one that I had the conversation with, is we don't need something new. I mean, just anything that, is reliable, just to get from point A to point B. And I don't know anything on that end yet.
Okay, but that would be an additional.
Correct.
So, Ms. Johnson, did you want to further?
Well,
Ken's-
well, like Dr. Nicely said, that these individuals, and this is a similar plan as what the city of Salem uses, and I spoke to Chief Crawley over there, and he said it has worked out great for them. And we staff a lot of our courthouse with part-time deputies. So in law enforcement, we can retire at a relatively young age of 50. And a lot of guys will do that because it doesn't really pay to continue to work beyond that point with VRS. And then they love to come back and work for $25.02 an hour to provide security in our courthouse. It works great. We've got a lot of good guys there that do it. And basically, these guys will be trained to the exact level of our current SROs, whether it be at the police department or the sheriff's department. They're required to be law enforcement certified. They've been through an academy. Most of these guys would have many, many years of law enforcement experience, and then also attend SRO school, as well as every year there's qualifications through the state that they have to maintain. So we go above and beyond at our department with those qualifications. So these individuals would be fully capable, sworn individuals in these positions. Do you guys have any questions? I mean, it's pretty kind of clear, cut, and dry. Besides, I know that we want more than 4. And to answer the question earlier that Mike brought up, it's hard. Right now, I don't have 4 people. Once we come up with the plan that, hey, we are going to have the funds and it's time to get going. Right now, I've got 2 that are ready to come on board that I could get relatively quickly. But to get them by August, we need to know something pretty quick because they got to go through a hiring process where backgrounds are checked and all of that good stuff. Unless somebody were retiring today, we're going to run backgrounds. We're going to do everything like we would for any other deputy sheriff. And then we have to make sure that we get uniforms and all the equipment that's needed.
If you got someone coming from retirement that's been retired for a while.
Can't be a while. They have to
So how long do
maintain.
you have to, do they go through?
It depends on when their certification, when they were last certified. There's a 2-year window. So DCGS, it just depends. If it's been longer than 2 years, a lot of times they'll make them go through a whole complete academy. Sometimes they don't. It just depends on how long that separation is.
How long is an academy?
Academy's 10 weeks. Which
But
you're not
over
going
two-
to,
over 2 years.
but you're not going to want to have, somebody that's, 50, 52 years old is not going to want to go through an academy again. That's a lot to ask of somebody after they've been doing the job for a while. But I'm confident we can fill 4. Now,
How do we get 12 more?
well, a lot of money. Obviously this plan's not perfect, but with the current 2, and we also supplement with our civil process deputies. We have 3 civil process guys that are out serving papers. They're supposed to stop by the schools in what district they're working every day, as well as administration. I stop by, the captain, sheriff even stops by. We do everything we can to maintain as much presence as possible. But with 2 guys and, 8 schools each, you're looking at about a 20 to 30 minute time period they can spend at that school. And that's not a lot when you're talking about a 7-hour day. On top of it, and I don't know where we are with this, and I wasn't able to reach Assistant Chief today. I imagine they were off for the holiday. But traffic direction, our 2 SROs are providing traffic direction at Fort Lewis and Back Creek, and that's morning and evening. So that's taking a little bit of time as well. So I would love to get that relieved. I don't know where we are with a contractor.
Here's the only thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about, if we added and made it 6, at least that would give 1 for every 2 schools, and maybe, some proximity, in some of the schools, and I'm sure we'll still have a couple that would be hard probably, but anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got 16.
It would definitely make a difference.
If
I
you
mean,
had 6, that with the 2 would make 8, and that would be 1 for 2 schools.
And that would be the half of the school day at each school some way.
right, because right now with this, maybe 2.5 hours a day, 2.5 to 3, depending on how close your schools are together. And we try to put them together, with the SROs and the schools they're assigned to make sense, obviously, logistically. But it cuts down on travel time. We have the outlier schools that, takes time to get to. So,
Yeah, ideally, we want to see 16. I mean, that was the ultimate thing
sure.
when we're talking about. But the visibility of these people in the schools, more time being in the schools, which if you had the 8, which were dividing between 2 schools, That could be, geographically, it could be a lot quicker to get to these two elementary schools. Plus, you would have them a lot more visibility, which is important. They're inside walking around, they're outside walking around, they're very visible, the car's sitting there. You know, that's a deterrent,
Absolutely.
Every layer of protection is important.
yeah.
Ms.
That's right.
Peterson, would it be safe to assume that instead of 108,000 for 4, it would be 160,000 for 6?
$163,220.
And then each deputy, it's about $8,500 to outfit them.
And so do we all agree that this is something we should do?
Oh, yeah.
Good. So if that be the case, and I know we don't want to ask the Board of Supervisors for anything, God forbid, we don't want to do that. But my thing would be, it's a public safety. We ought to go to them and say, look, we need 163,000 plus whatever the cars are. This is not a wish list. This is something we feel like we have to have list. Shouldn't come out of education funds.
Emergency list.
Yes, this is something you need to fund.
Yeah.
And this is something you need to do.
It's not a large cost, in my opinion, for the peace of mind and the added layer of protection.
Absolutely.
Really considering the overall budget. Can somebody talk about what Roanoke City just did that was in the paper,
What they're hoping to do.
hoping to do?
Yeah, I believe they were
So-
asking for 600,000.
So compare that to
And they have one at each school.
163,000.
Well, it promotes a good community relationship as well. And a lot of times you can pick up on problems before they happen. And I think that's a big piece that people don't realize. You know, once that SRO is in that school, you get to know everybody. And then you see when something's not
That's a
right.
big
That's what we're trained to do.
And the kids, students might feel comfortable talking to these.
Sure, and the people that we select, we make sure they're great with kids. They love kids. You know, our SROs that we currently have, they coach sports. They're involved in their communities. It's a great opportunity for them, but it's also great to give back to the community like that. You really get ingrained, and the community relationships you build, and the response time is the biggest thing. You know, we can look at statistics all we want of, well, we can't really say that it actually deters. We don't know, because maybe it did, and you just don't know that it deterred something. But if an SRO is inside of a building, it's an immediate response versus an SRO or a road officer, let's say he's, 3 minutes away. And that's pretty good response time. Depending on where your school's at, 3 minutes is that's pretty decent response time. The time it takes for that 911 call to go through and that officer to get dispatched and an officer to get there, that's asking a lot in 3 minutes, but let's say it's 3 minutes. Every minute counts when something like this is happening, as well as when that SRO is in the school every day. He knows the grounds, he knows the school, he knows, where classrooms and hallways and things are. It's a definite advantage.
You
And
know
they
what else
did-
he probably knows? I'm sorry, Mike.
No.
He also knows who's propping open a door when they shouldn't be propping open a door. He's paying attention to those little things that other people might not paying attention to, and he's going to address it. So it's hard for one person to address somebody else sometimes, but the SRO in that position is to say, hey, that's not happening.
And
at
they
my
will
school.
go into the schools.
Right.
They're not gonna stand outside.
No, we are not trained to stand outside. I can't comment on other jurisdictions and what in the world's going on with that, but we've been trained from day one. I know the county's been training this as long as I've been a police officer, that you don't wait for anybody. You go to the shots, you go to the situation. There's no holding back, there's no waiting.
Right.
It's an immediate response.
But I think we need to at least do two for each, one for 2 schools. I mean, that's obvious that if we can't do the 16, and I'm not saying you're gonna be able to furnish those, but we still need to strive for that.
And then maybe next year we can come back and get a few more to
Yeah.
and keep increasing.
Depending on,
And did I hear correctly, maybe I didn't, but I thought out of those meetings the other night, one of y'all told me that they discussed that and that it really wasn't gonna go any further with the discussions on.
which meeting?
Well, the Board of Supervisors, I thought. they had a
I
closed
didn't know.
session,
I don't know.
And one of those were related to that, but it wasn't going any further. So I think us being proactive, I just think we have to do it,
Yeah.
I don't care if they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs. I think there's so many positives that can come out of that. Community relations, it's not gonna be a bad thing for us to start building back up our law enforcement instead of tearing it down. And if that's what we get out of it and they're never used, that would be wonderful, right? We hope that's the case. We hope they're never used and we're, I don't want to say wasting our money, but that's what we're doing. That would be fine.
Yeah, you're never wasting for
That's
safety.
right. That's
Never.
right.
No.
So I would like to ask our board, to ask their board to give up, whether it's 200 or 250,000 for this specific need.
We were just at 160.
Well, but I'm saying we gotta have cars, right?
And Mr.
Yeah.
President, we would have to also factor in the additional equipment, because you guys could budget for 4, but.
Correct. Yeah, so the other two would probably be about 17,000 for equipment. And then over time, obviously, the equipment has to be replaced. And that's something that we would have to look at too. I mean, uniforms wear out. Guns usually have a pretty good lifespan. Tasers have a decent lifespan, but
This
over
is a
time.
public safety. This is our kids' public
Yeah.
safety.
Yeah.
Who can say no?
And we're representing the same constituents as they are.
That's right.
So, I mean, these are, but you said 2, I thought we were gonna get 4. We were gonna have 8.
No, I
Two
said,
additional.
6 total.
right.
If we
already
went
have
from
two.
4
Yeah,
to 6.
we already have
we
2,
currently
but
have
we
2.
need to get,
So, yeah.
exactly.
Yes, if we were to, if
I
we
just
were to
didn't want
ask
you
for
to know that
6,
we had a total, that'll be a total of 8.
we would have 8,
Right.
correct? Which would make 2 per school, like Dave talked
Exactly.
about.
Do you
which would
think
be
that's
great.
feasible, Mr. Hudson?
I can't give you a time frame on how quick I can get 6, people,
That's gonna be the
Going.
hard part.
but, like I said, I've already reached out to 2, and I have 2 that are solid, ready to go, that would be willing to come on. But once I know for sure that we're, a go, and once we advertise this, I have a good feeling that we're gonna get some applications. We're gonna get people that wanna do it.
Yeah, well, I think we need to act, and we need to act fast. We need to act
start.
now.
We need to
And-
start.
Yeah, we need
I'd
to
like
start
to-
yesterday.
Yeah,
I'd
exactly.
like to go ahead and get that budget money in place, and I don't have a problem with going to the Board of Supervisors and asking them for some assistance.
What do you think our total would be, Brent, with the cars and the equipment? Do we have a
I don't have a-
guesstimate?
I don't have a total on the cars, like Mike was mentioning, do we have anything, I mean, we don't have to necessarily need new fancy cars, it doesn't really matter, just give us a, sedan or SUV.
Do we know what's in surplus?
We've got a station wagon.
No, we don't.
Mark Station.
Yeah.
They won't give that up.
is that?
We've tried.
Susan, you said the figure was what, 160 for salaries?
220 in salary.
And then add, so 163 and add 17,
That's right, 180.
96.
So you're looking at plus or minus 200,000 for that much more security. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
We gotta do
And
it.
I just want to thank you, Brent, because I know this is something that's near and dear to your heart, obviously, and you and Sheriff Orange have been working on this, and you're a great asset to this board. And to have you be able to step up and help us out with this, it's really perfect timing.
I appreciate that,
Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
And
it.
Sheriff Orange has stepped up
Mm-hmm.
in prior years.
Absolutely. So do we
And I
need
will
to-
say that I
I'm
think
sorry.
with both of them having children in the schools currently, it helps, it truly helps recognize the need and what it does mean for our schools.
It does, and it's not, a lot of people view it as there's a police officer just walking around the school or he's just sitting in an office, and, that's not what it's about. There's so many positive things for the community from this.
Absolutely.
On top of the safety part, the interactions with kids, like I said, we do have the troubled kids and some of the things that we were talking about earlier with counselors and stuff. I mean, it's a positive, you can have a positive influence on a lot of kids, and you can reduce the violence and reduce some of the issues that we do have.
It gives them somebody to go to. I mean, so, we talk about life counselors, may not be in a life counseling situation, but I just think there's so many positives that come
Yeah.
from it.
Oh, those
It
kids, they really do like these.
It's a positive role model.
They are, and they're around, and they give them that comfort, and they also comfort to say something.
Yeah.
Whereas they might not say it to a teacher, you always say, see something, say something. Well, this gives
They
the
got somebody to
opportunity
say it
for
to.
someone to talk to.
No, I agree.
Well, and for our future, I mean, as kids, they grow up and they're around positive influence like that, they have a different look at law enforcement.
That's right.
Later in life.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So do we need to formalize this with that we're gonna move forward with the 6, and then ask David and Dr. Nicely to formalize a letter to ask for those funds from the board. Is that what we need to do under
Yes,
consent?
right, and so we were going to, we could amend the proposal, if that's okay with Mr., I'd say, in terms of what the sheriff's office has put forward, we can go ahead and amend it in terms of what our board would approve for 6 additional, that we would, fund the salaries for 6 additional ones. Again, keep in mind, if we get more local money, we're gonna be asking for that in our budget, in addition to, I know we're gonna make the ask of the county to fund it anyway, but we could definitely put that, in, and that would, go on consent for Thursday.
Okay.
If that's okay. And just for whatever it's worth, I sent this out to you all, but, I have, and again, we appreciate so much, all of our public safety partners, the sheriff's office stepping up in this front. I mean, we have a great working relationship with the police department, fire and rescue, and everybody's so committed and invested, in our students. But just so that, it's not left unsaid and very clear, and I'm very sympathetic to all the staffing challenges that all these groups face, but I have put formally in writing, to the county, our county counterparts, that we definitely value our SROs, and we want to see one in each school. And really for me, the tipping point is just that one life saved over every single minute that passes by in a critical situation. To me, it just comes down to that right there.
Absolutely. If we save one life, I hope we never have to.
Too late after it happens.
That's right.
So I can share a little bit of information. I don't know if you saw, the governor did approve some funds going to the localities for SROs. I have not seen what it looks like yet, but I think the locality will have that information. And for the purpose of putting this on consent, I did look at our open positions, and if the county could not help at this point in time, just to assuage your concerns as to the budget, I looked at all of our open positions, and our payroll lapse will cover this for now, and we could probably fit it in with payroll lapse for the year, but it would be better formally to put it into the budget. And so I understand that you want to ask for the help, but should that not come through, we could fit it in. So I just wanted to make.
But we can't let it not come
Yeah,
through.
I was gonna say, I think
This-
Yeah.
With the additional, we're gonna, we'll get it
We
approved.
still have to go write the check meanwhile, that's what.
right, right.
This is
We
something
hear
they
you.
should tell us they are doing. Thank you
We'll go
to Brent for doing it. But yeah.
Serves the entire community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. All right, item 2.04, request for funding for fencing as identified by the safety audits.
I just fixed it.
I probably should have put the safety audit overview process before we looked at that, but just, we guess we'll do it in that order.
Would you prefer to switch it?
You might want to hear that first. Dr. Segal is going to kind of go over what the safety audit looks like, and then that leads into why we're making this request. If that might make
Okay,
more
we'll
sense.
jump to item 2.05.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Stegall, overview of the school safety audit process.
Sorry, Mr. Lowe, jerked that cable right out of your hand.
Ron to say, time to go home.
Not
time
take
to
so
go home."
long to get over here.
That's right.
Then you can go home.
All right. All right, so the annual school safety audit, there are 3 things that schools have to do every single year to meet the mandated audit system. And in accordance to the Code of Virginia, public school divisions are required to complete these 3 audits. We actually have to respond to DCJS, and they check off that every school has followed what they have requested. I have to sign off as Dr. Nicely's designee that our division, every school has responded. We have all this on hand. So there is a checks and balances for this system. And so there has been a change to this code, and it basically requires that school boards collaborate with law enforcement, and we have always done that. We continue to do that. We actually have a meeting, and I give copies to all 27 of our safety and emergency plans to every law enforcement locality around us, Salem, Vinton, and also, of course, Roanoke PD and Sheriff's Office. So they get a copy of all of our plans. They have those in a pen drive ready to go in case any incident were to happen. And we also work very close with the police department. They come in, our SROs or have currently been working on our inspections. And so we give them a copy of that as well. So that's what the code changed to say, is that we have to share all of our information both ways, and we have been doing that. We'll continue to do that. So the three things that our schools have to do is they have to complete a survey every year. It's an annual safety survey. It's due by August 1st, and basically what that's used for is the DCJS and the VDOE collect this information. They look at best practices across the state. They use that information to make best practice recommendations. The second thing they have to do is there is a they have to do their safety and emergency plans, which I talked about. There's a public version that we share, but there is a staff version that we do not share that has all the particulars per school. It has staff who are assigned to roles to do certain tasks when an event were to happen. It has the locations of our evacuation sites for each school. It has information that we do not share with the public for safety reasons, of course. And so they work on those plans. They have to submit those plans to me. We submit them to the police department. We all review them to make sure that they're complete, and that is something we have to check off every year. And this third one is happening currently. 22 of our 27 schools have been completed already. So what happens is the team of SROs goes into each school. They walk around, and there is a DCJS checklist that is multiple pages long. And our police department does an amazing job with this because they go through and they complete the checklist, but they also take pictures of all the concerning things that they see. And we get reports for that. So I asked them this year if they could go ahead and send the reports to the principals immediately as soon as they're done, and to send me a copy, just so usually there's a deadline for that in August, and we wait till August to get this information. So we did speed up that, and 27 of them, I currently have 27 copies. They still have 5 to complete. So what the principals are doing is they're waiting most of them are walking through this checklist with the SROs, so they're on site and see what's happening. But they get this report, and then they've been asked this year to send me any immediate concerns. For example, outside doors that don't lock, inside doors that don't lock, things that we want fixed before school opens. So if you've ever looked at one of these checklists, they include things like shrub needs to be trimmed near camera 2, or there's a variety of things that we wouldn't necessarily call immediate, important but not immediate, right? So we have to prioritize those because some schools have more than others, and if you look at 27 schools, that list gets very lengthy. So what we have to do is prioritize. So what we're asking the principals to do now is to take a look at that report, to send me a list immediately of the immediate safety concerns that need to be fixed. And then they still have a deadline to do a written assessment that has to be done through DCJS anyway. That written assessment is due at end of August. And they take that checklist that the SROs did for them, and they summarize in a written review of what they think is the most important to get done. What's great about this is every time the very next year, the SROs go back, they put on the checklist the things that we corrected as a school division. So these were the things that were on the list, and here's what the school division did to correct them, but here are things that still need to be corrected. So it's a running report year after year of concerns, what we've fixed, and what still needs to be done. So we all have copies of that, and what we have done in the past is we get with Department of Facilities and Operations, and we take the entire list for the division, and we prioritize. So we haven't done that in the last couple years because of COVID, and so we're back to wanting to get the immediate concerns out, and then we are going to get with Facilities and Operations and create a prioritized list. And then that would kind of be a punch list of safety needs as we go. So we currently have, I've heard back from 10 of the 27 schools have responded with their immediate needs. The reason for the 10, I just got probably 7 reports today. So they just haven't had time to review the report. So I'd say by the end of next week, we will have all those immediate concerns down on paper and ready to, operations and facilities already can see that list, so they're punching through that as they can. So any questions about how that works? And the one thing about the written assessment and the police checklist, by DCJS, we only have to do that every 3 years. Our police department does it every single year, and they don't have to. So we appreciate that they do that.
And I might say, I was at one of the schools when they were there, and it was about 4, maybe, police
yeah.
officers going around, I mean, they were doing the audit.
Yeah, it's a very, very good and detailed report.
Yeah, I think Chief Hall told me all 5 resource officers try to get together and compare every school that go to all of them.
No, and I think that's
Consistency.
information, I'm sorry,
Sorry.
that the general public doesn't always know, that these steps are being taken and the proper protocols are being followed. And to your point, above and beyond, because they do it every year. So thank you for reporting that.
Sure.
Exactly, and Brent can attest that they know things that they would do that they can't tell us or anybody.
Right.
And that's that's the way it works.
And I will say the school system has done a great job. Starting out, I was an SRO in 2010 to 15, and it's a huge difference now compared to what it was then. And I will throw some kudos to our superintendent, a lot better in wanting to get these things done than prior administration. So appreciate your willingness to do that.
We've got a good team, so,
Yeah.
so based on getting those immediate needs, from the principals, we've had a specific request and related to fencing at several of the schools, and again, based on just what is coming in. And because fencing is more costly, it's not something we can do in-house, we wanted to bring up, thank you, Dr. Segal. We wanted to bring a request to look at some of those immediate needs that will require, contracting with people and getting that ball rolling. And of course, because of the expense, we'll have to look at taking that out of matter capital reserve. So Mr. Love has that information.
Sure, so 5 locations have been identified where fencing would be appropriate to enhance security and safety for the students. These 5 locations are at Oak Grove, Herman L. Horn, Penn Forest, Masons Cove, and W.E. Cundiff. We'll start off here with Oak Grove Elementary. And I have some rudimentary maps here to show you where we're looking at for fencing. So this one, this red here is 4-foot fence that we're looking at running around the parking lot. And this green stretch is a 6-foot long fence. This was all recommended under the security recommendations. The staff at Oak Grove has requested additional 6-foot fencing to run along this purple line to provide a buffer with that tree line. So we've estimated some cost for this. Let me go back to this one. For the first option, which was the security recommendations, we're looking at about $28,733. That's 275 feet of the 6-foot high fence, 347 feet of the 4-foot high fence, a couple gates as well. Compared to option 1, which was the school request, their request was for $41,915.
Does that enclose everything? Because the purple line seemed like it stopped.
It stops at the end of the tree line.
So it does not go all the way back to
It
the
does not
school.
go all the way back to the school.
And there's a park on that hill, isn't it?
There it is.
Right. Part of that is just not wanting to impede, that access. The immediate need, and Mr. Kegels was out there, Mr. Kaufman doing the measurements, but the 4-foot, that's more of a safety kind of issue in terms of the playground, proximity to the playground, the parking lot. Just not wanting kids, running out in the parking lot and that kind of thing. And then the rest with that tree line, and the green part that the safety audit committee, our group identified, we've actually, or Ms. Clemitis said, or Dr. Clemitis, excuse me, has actually had some, vagrants and that kind of thing hanging out, in that immediate area. And of course, that's the part that kind of faces beyond that to 419. So that's why that was identified. And then the purple line, as Mr. Lowe was explaining.
Is that a commercial?
The parking lot above the green line, is that, what is that?
That's the
Is
park.
that the church?
That's that commercial lot right above there.
Yeah, the purple line.
Office building.
That's an office building, yeah.
This is a drainage swell right here.
Is there a reason why she wouldn't have requested to go all the way to the building with that?
Brent, up here is a kind of a park, and so people do kind of walk through, but I think they could see it visually with
There's also a
cameras.
walking trail around that
And
field
walking
now.
trails, so it's just not possible, but I think the main concern in talking to her was
I'm just trying to
that,
think of keeping people out of that whole area altogether.
The
But I
baseball
see what
field,
you're
I guess,
saying.
gets used by, Parks and Rec and that kind of
Parks,
thing. as
yeah.
part of it.
yeah, I asked her that question too, and the security concern, and I guess the officers who did the audit felt like it was really the back.
Oh, yeah, because you would have to pull into that parking lot, you would be on camera by the time you were at that point.
And I
so.
think they had some issues in the past of maybe somebody calling to a child who was a parent who was supposed to be, not in the picture type of thing, so
Or a
just.
barrier, kind of a deterrent kind of thing.
Something
versus,
deterrent.
Let's seal it off, kind of approach, so.
No, because they have to kind of walk all the way around and be visible. So,
Okay.
So the second school that we're going to look at is Herman L. Horn, and this is more of a safety issue with the kids around the playground. And if you're familiar with out here at Horn, they have this wide open play area with the playground right here. Gates Lane, we did fence Gates Lane probably about 5 or 6 years ago with a 6-foot fence down to this point where the red line starts. But they're looking to run a 4-foot high fence here. And this will keep kids from running out into any streets or driveways, chasing balls or frisbees, things like that during recess or PE. So it's really more of a safety issue than a security issue here. And they felt the 4-foot fence would be sufficient along the road and along this drive, and it would tie it back into the school up here, and we would provide a couple gates so they can get to the ball field as well.
Will they leave the gates open so that people can access that track during non-school hours?
I think that would just be a administrative decision. I'm sure that,
there's
I
a
think
lot
most
of-
schools leave those gates open so that the playgrounds can be used on the weekends. I know Burlington, they were locking theirs at Burlington.
It just causes a bigger problem.
Right, and now the gate's been destroyed for the most part
Right.
on the weekends so they can get in.
Well, I know a lot of the community uses that to walk
Sure.
and stuff.
And I think, I was at Penn Forest today, and also Clearbrook, but Penn Forest, they got us, well, we'll get to it, but it's the same situation of after hours, it's up to school personnel to unlock those gates so they can have access to these parks, or walking, or whatever it may be. So, I mean, it's up to them now. If that falls by the wayside, then you can see where somebody might want to tear a fence down. So, I mean, we got our responsibility as schools to make sure that we're opening those facilities for after hours. And you have summer school at the schools now, well, you still gotta keep them off of those, park facilities during it's school hours, even if it's summer school, right?
Yeah, and I think, to your point, the idea is to keep the children safe while they're at school.
Exactly.
And that is a big deal, because, anybody could drive right up there and grab one of those kids.
What's the cost on that, Mr. Lowe?
So this one, we broke down to two different costs. One, just this stretch right here along, I believe that's what Mountain View Drive. So we broke it up into two different costs, just for reference. So just that stretch was $8,640, and for the entire fencing project, it would be $24,904. We build in a 10% contingency just because the price of fencing is changing by dollars every day. So we're just trying to be cautious with that contingency.
But to me, you're still on the road, right? I mean, that's what you're trying to do, keep the kids from going out.
From going out to the road, yes, sir.
And all of that's road.
No,
Yes.
part of it's driveway.
Part of that's driveway.
The longer section is driveway versus Mountain View, you're crossing the cemetery there.
Oh,
This is a
Okay.
drop-off
That's-
area right
Okay.
here, turnaround. And Ms. Sandesmiser doesn't, she says there's not a lot of traffic on that road, but they occasionally do get some traffic. It's mostly when buses and parent pickup.
And we separated those out because that's what the police said. The police asked for the fence along 651 and the safety review. The other is what the school asked for.
Oh, okay.
Same as the previous one.
Okay, it's just not in purple or something, or color.
Different colors, yeah.
Yeah.
W.E. Condiff, we had two different options here. slow getting around here. Option one was running this, this fence along the entire back of the property and tying back around to this wood line. And then another 4-foot fence that comes off the building along the top of the wall, at back there at the kitchen area.
We are so lucky somebody hadn't fell off that wall.
It's a pretty good drop.
Yes.
And this one is going to be even more prevalent for when we put our mobile classroom back here, because this is where the mobile classroom's going, is right here in this area. So that first option, sorry, I have to keep going back and forth here, was a price of $91,190. It's about 1,500 feet of 6-foot high fence and 150 feet of the 4-foot high fence. Option two for Cundiff was a little bit less ground. Let's see if I can find what I did with it. There it is. So this is tying the 6-foot fence back into the corner of the building, coming out to the rear of the property, and it's basically just engulfing that playground and not worrying about this open space here.
Yeah, nobody uses that I mean, they'll use it occasionally for PE or something, but for the most part, that 75–80% doesn't get used.
And this is 4-foot fence following the same trajectory, but tying back into that 6-foot fence just to completely enclose that area.
That option looks better.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, unless somebody says.
Unless there's a road back there
I
that I
know
don't
you don't,
see.
I know we don't want to build our schools like prisons, you know, but we're building them out of glass and, you know, and we're putting fences up in partial sections. And I mean, you just got to make it as hard as possible for somebody to do something.
That's gonna protect, on that one, that's gonna protect the playground. That's where Ashley was saying a lot of the people are coming through the neighborhood, coming back in there, and they catch them, and they don't even really know they're coming back into a school playground. So that'll work fine.
And option two saves about 800 feet of linear feet of fencing, and that cost was $48,235.
And there are gates in all of them.
Yes, ma'am. We do have gates going in each one of these.
I'm just thinking if the school locked down, they would want to leave the school, so they need to be able to get out of that gate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then one that came in right before this meeting was Mason's Cove. There was a recommendation to fence in the generator area, which is right here. Generator and the cooling tower here. And so we have a 6-foot of fencing there. We have a total cost of $5,200,
Hey, Chris, can you-
$5,225.
Can you bring that back up?
Sure.
So I spoke with Ms. Phelps earlier today because I knew this was on the agenda. And so the playground where the kindergarten and pre-kindergarten.
It's right down here where the cursor is.
Right.
Yes, sir.
To me, that's probably more important to fence in, and she agreed, than the other.
And we got that request probably just a few minutes before this meeting, and we did estimate $2,000 for that stretch of fencing there.
Yeah, I would
But-
definitely, if we're gonna do it, I would
Yeah.
definitely want to add that in there, because those are where your kids are at, and those wood line back there, I mean, it, again, if somebody wants to do something.
Yes, sir. I just didn't get a chance to update the drawing or the report before it was posted.
Sure.
But that
What
would
is the
be-
red line area protecting?
That is where there's a generator and a cooling tower is there. And it was recommended that that area be fenced off from any kind of damage or
Are there any posts in the ground now is that a parking lot right next to it?
this is parking here and drive, access drive back.
Are there any posts in the ground or anything?
No, sir. This right here on the backside is about an 8-foot tall wall that this is tucked into, so the fence would just tie right into that wall.
I wonder, it's a new school. Why wasn't that protected earlier?
Hard to say.
So that price of $5,225, I'd like to add $2,000 to that to include the playground fencing and gate as well.
Is that all the
Okay.
schools?
What's that dollar amount total come to if we go option 2 on Cundiff and,
Have you done pay for us yet?
I have not.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
I must have skipped it. In Forest.
Can I ask one more, to Dr. Stigall's point on option 2, and I guess this would go to Mr. Cables and Ashley McCallum. Can you pull up the drawing on that? And I just want
For
to.
Conda?
Yes, please. Would it make sense, and maybe she wants it, if she does, that's to leave out just a little portion of the right side there, the green, and then there's no question the kids could get out or the people could get out, or, I mean, the deterrent is to keep people from the neighborhood walking, or kids, or whatever, just walking back into the playground.
Well, one thing you'd want to look at is wherever your lockdown protocols would be as to where you're going to be taking the kids in that situation, that's where you would want to put a gate.
Okay.
So wherever your secondary location would be away from there, I don't know if you know offhand what that
I
is.
think theirs is behind, like, it's back behind that building. Your church back there, you can walk through that back field.
This is a church down here.
The Presbyterian church
Yeah.
beside it.
But behind it, there's not a church. Now, there's houses back to the left.
That one's probably, yeah. She was saying she was gonna have to get the kids down through the trees there.
Is that
But I
gates
just-
on the back as well?
I think we planned, we didn't design it out completely yet, Mr. Ray, but I think we built
honestly-
in 3 gates for that,
3 gates?
for that option, yes, sir.
You honestly, I don't think would even need a gate back to the residential area. That's why I said if you came down and just, now if Ashley wants it absolutely cut off, that's one thing, but if she doesn't have a preference, I think you could stop that down 10 or 15, 20 foot from the school, and then if somebody needs to exit and get away from there, there's nothing impeding them. The deterrent is just people wander back into, and not for whatever reason. She's told me that a couple different occasions over the years, that people just kind of were back there with the kids, and she'd have to go and tell them, look, you can't be back here.
Yeah, so similar situation to Oak Grove, right? So you would want to keep it, you have it open so you can get out quickly. But if somebody is getting, I mean, it's a clear barrier, and if somebody does get in, you're able to visualize who's coming in. They're not coming in through a wooded area. You can identify them and correct them, if you
And this
will.
would lead you to the big field, out there, which nobody should be out there coming into the school. But again, if she wants it, I'm happy, whatever she wants, but I just thought, to Dr. Stegall's point, if you left open 10 or 15, 20 foot, whatever it is back there, on that right side, then they could just, if they had to run or leave, you could just, there would be nothing impeding you.
We discussed gates in that area with Ashley Moore, and that was really good.
Okay.
And if you had gates, you're
I'll
gonna
check.
lock them, but then they'd be able to get out, I guess, once you unlock them.
As long as they were unlocked when they went to leave,
Well, I'm not so sure we lock gates
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
and we don't. I mean, and that's the thing, if you lock them and you do get in a situation where you gotta rush the kids out that way,
Yeah.
the padlock on it, you're out of luck.
That's
So we're not
mine.
locking the gates.
If y'all spoke, you know what she wants. I'm just curious if that.
Well, I think it's a good point, because if you have to do a mass exodus, you don't want, you'd rather have 5 kids go through one little gate or 25.
Being able to get out.
Yeah. These are things that sadly we have to start to think about. I mean, we've not start to, but
Yeah.
I don't want to forget about Penn Forest. We also looked at Penn Forest, and this is all 4-foot fencing here, enclosing this area, and then bringing that.
That's where the kindergarten classrooms are.
Yes, sir.
They come out to that concrete pad.
So the public track is outside of that fence?
It's right here.
Yes.
It goes in those
Oh,
trees?
that's a sidewalk there.
And that's the track that goes around, that they walk around to by the fields.
So we would run that 4-foot fence off of that little enclosure to this point, and then run it back up and tie into an existing fence that's already enclosing that playground. And then we'd bring another piece of fence from the playground over to the corner of the building. That would completely keep that area locked down, so to speak. So this plan for Penn Forest, we were looking at a price of $20,570.
Your
Yeah.
green lines and your red lines, were those recommended by the safety
These
people, or
were,
were those different heights of fences?
these are different heights of fences. The green was a 6-foot, the red's 4-foot. On that map, it might have changed from one map to the other, Mr. Linden.
But that would enclose that.
You all know that Penn Forest playground is like a destination playground for the whole valley, so it gets a
Yeah.
lot of traffic in the park.
A lot of
Well, you
traffic.
know that we had a problem last year where the guy came and the principal went out, and they're not even a parent, well, it was a 2-year-old, and he cursed at the principal and told her she didn't have a right to tell him, and it was posted already that you can't be there on school hours. And he didn't, and he cursed at the bus drivers, and the police had to come, and it was a nasty situation. And, you know, just today, she had to tell some folks at the playground that they had to leave because we had got summer school, even though she had those
Wow.
signs on the sidewalks that you can't be here during these hours because it's summer school. But, you know, and it's a constant, you know, monitoring, so, you know, it was, you know, in those situations you're gonna have, especially when you're sharing fields with the parks and recreation, so. You know,
What's the calculator say?
129,664.
And that's going with which options for Oak Grove and Horn?
It was going for, this for Mason's Cove.
Option 2.
Condiff was option 2. And Forest was the number we proposed. Horn was going for the option 2. And Oak Grove was going for the option 2, the security recommendation.
let me add one thing, and I know you're still getting audits, but I happened to stop by Clearbrook, and back in the days when I was on the Board of Supervisors, they had about 36,000 vehicles a day, and a quarter of that's trucks. Now it's over 50,000, and they put a fence in the front, but it just goes through the front, black rail fence. And I asked her, and she's put it on a work order to separate, there's a house behind it, that's a palm reading place, and then there's Willow Creek, is that the name of it?
Willow tree maybe or
He's
something.
blowing up right
Tree.
there. Mike, look at it.
Oh, okay. And she wanted to extend that fence on the perpendicular side so that they could separate the businesses in that house and traffic there, and people just walk across, or park in the school parking lot and walk across over to the other two businesses. So I think that's what she was going to request. I don't know how far back, but I
Here's
know
where that
that's-
existing fence
yeah.
ends, Mr.
Yeah.
Ray. So she just wants us to tie it back this way?
Yes. And I don't know
Does
what-
she, I mean, if I recall that fence properly, that's almost one you can step over. It's not very high.
Correct.
Oh, no, it is. It is
One-
on the front. You can't, kids can't get
It's an
through it.
ornamental,
Kids.
black aluminum
Metal
fence.
black rail.
Yeah. How high is it?
It's 4 feet, 6 feet, 4 feet,
It's 4.
4. Yeah. And that deterred, you know, because that's where the buses and, I mean, not the buses, but the car riders, and that's where they come and the kids are out all, you know, and that's the reason we got the one in the front. But, you know, just enclose it to come back this way so you wouldn't deter anybody coming over from over and parking in here to walk over. So I think that was the whole thing. I don't know what kind of you'll find when y'all maybe look at it, but I think you'll find it a safety factor.
Is that one of the schools that hasn't been done yet, Dr. Stegall?
Bearbrook. I don't know if theirs.
I
She
don't think
definitely
I saw
hasn't
it.
responded to our sheet yet.
I don't think I
Yeah.
said.
She said she had a work order now. I don't know if that was a different thing than what you're talking about.
Most of them are still sending me those.
Okay.
Most of them will say, this work order has been in, and we're repeating them.
Okay, because she showed me on her computer that she'd put in work orders.
So was it in the safety audit thing also, or was it already?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just know when I stopped by there, I just wanted to see how things are going. And I said, hey, what about your fence? And she said that she'd put it in as a work order.
Okay, we need to make sure that gets done.
Yeah, to get off that corner,
Mm-hmm.
so.
That one seems like a no-brainer.
Maybe y'all
I
could,
mean, the proximity to 220 right there, everything.
oh yeah, it's, like I say, that's kind of traffic, and you got Walmart across the street too.
That's easy.
We're probably talking less than 10,000 for that little piece, aren't we?
I would think so.
Does she want to go back with the black wrought iron decorative
chain link from there.
Yeah, I think you could probably do that.
We can do that for
I don't think you'd need that,
5,000 extra.
5,000.
That seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Hers is in,
I should, oh,
her report's
her
in.
too. Okay.
Does she
But
have
that
that
would-
on
that would
She
at least
hasn't
keep it.
responded for her list yet.
there? Okay.
So $133,000?
I lost track of what my first number was.
I think you were
forgot to say
128.
128.
128?
129 I had written down.
Was it 129?
Ms. Peterson, if that came out of minor capital reserves, where does that put us?
Just take it out of our 5 million.
Um,
Mark, you're not supposed to laugh.
Time to go home. Time to go home. Time to go home.
It is Mike, not.
They'll put you in with me.
He'll be put in jail.
So,
And she'd already, Ms. Peterson already kind of had shown some of that fencing expense on the revised with the minor
Yes.
capital figures.
That's
so-
Right.
Okay.
yeah, I got kind of lost because I was trying to do numbers really quick, because the maintenance code wasn't on my list and the 10% wasn't on, what I got the numbers early. So, just so I can get the numbers right, the minimum for every school will be a total of 112,000. If we did the additional, it'd be 183. So that's a $71,000 difference. And running that through,
I think the total that we just came up with.
No, it was 129.
Making those decisions, you're right, 134.
134 if we do,
134.
We can clear.
if Mike's,
134. Now, also knowing that we may need about 60,000 for mobile classrooms, will get us to about 535. If we're holding up back up a little bit for mobile classroom environment.
Which we have to do.
I don't know why I thought that was included.
See, I didn't even bring up, how could you miss electrical in those classrooms?
We asked about
This
it,
is for the
though. We thought,
technology piece.
yeah, it was the technology. The setup was included, but,
Yeah.
Technology.
yeah. I just want to say regarding the fencing, when I was meeting with Cindy and touring the schools and everything, this came up. And I'm just glad that together as a board, we're addressing this and we're going school by school and asking everybody for their opinions and getting it done. I think right now, as we all know, safety is first. And we need to address this and get it taken care of. There's no doubt in my mind that we have to find the money for this.
would we like this to be a consent agenda item for Thursday?
Mhm, If that's okay.
Any issues, concerns? Mr. Greenway?
You know what? I'm good with this, Dave.
Thank you. Item 2.06. Thank you, Chris, by the way.
I'm sure I'll come up with something before we
Good
finish.
information right there. Item 2.06, discussion of parent-teacher conference day. Dr. Nicely.
Oh, goodness. Let's see. There we go. He gets the plug.
Well, okay, I'm plugged in. Why isn't that showing up there? Do I need to do a control F8 or something?
We'll have to get Jeff to upgrade you.
I don't see any function keys on my laptop.
Hey, Jeff.
Mr. Terry?
Could we get the superintendent upgraded?
I know.
to-
I don't know how. Sorry.
I hope you give that to,
Oh, just hit it. You don't have to hit function?
give him Dave's computer and y'all switch.
Oh, here we go. Duplicate. I knew to do a duplicate. I didn't know that.
There we go.
I had a lot of these, if you want
Alright.
to know. Parent-teacher conferences. My
Yeah,
mind
so
was
just
going
want
through
to do a little summary of the history around, what parent-teacher conferences are. Of course, we won't spend any time on that. We've all experienced those as in different roles and so forth, but kind of want to bring to the board's attention some ideas around, maybe revisiting a decision that was made about 3 years ago to change the format of that. So this is intended just to kind of provide some summary information and some proposed action steps. So, and this is the way all parent-teacher conferences go, by the way, everybody's smiling and happy and. So, Just to affirm, the whole purpose of this, school-home relationships, partnerships, communication is so vitally important, and it really does contribute to student success, when everybody's actively engaged, right, with students and their progress. So communication, of course, being key, and parents are, encouraged to visit schools on scheduled days like conferences and programs and volunteer service, and so we really do want parents to connect with our schools. And I'll talk more about, why bring this up now here in a minute. Of course, we're all familiar with the traditional sort of parent-teacher conference approach. In years past, and our board, may not be aware of the changes that occurred over the past, several years with this, but we're, familiar with how this used to look in terms of having designated days for parent-teacher conferences. And basically, that's when, people would, request a conference, either a teacher might request a parent, to come in for a conference, parents could request a conference. It doesn't mean there's a problem, right? It's just maybe, parents want to come in and meet their teacher and talk about how things are going and that kind of thing. So communication is always really good. Those designated days in years past were one in November, which falls on election day, because schools are closed on election day by design. So that's a good day to do it. And also another one was scheduled in February. So sometimes, students participated in these parent-teacher conferences, and especially in the older grades and that kind of thing. And we'll talk more about that here in a second as well in terms of what that looks like going forward. Of course, conferences could always be scheduled outside of the designated days, per request by a parent or a teacher. And of course, they could be held in, various modalities. Obviously, on those designated days, those were, all, in-person kinds of things. So the current parent-teacher conference system, which was changed a couple years ago, and I'll go back over the timeline here in a second, conferences went from being on designated days to not being on designated days. But the way the teachers work that is that that's obviously a paid day for teachers. They keep track of their time by having conferences, whether it's by phone, whether it's in person, whether it's by a video call, on days leading up to that day. So by election day in November, teachers log their conferences with parents throughout, and these are ones held after school hours, right? So it's not part of their contracted day already, since they're getting paid for those conference days. And again, of course, students can participate, and they can be held in different modalities. But again, these are on non-designated days, and held after school hours for them to get credit for that, so to speak, from the teacher standpoint. So just kind of a brief history of this. The 1990s and before, I still remember this when I became a teacher here in 1993. We had our traditional parent-teacher conferences days, on those designated days. And those were during normal, teacher hours, okay, during the school day, so to speak. And then in the early 2000s, this was when Dr. Weber came in as superintendent. They were still held on those designated days, but the times were adjusted. Instead of being during the traditional school day, they were adjusted to be noon to 7. That was probably around 2001, 2002 or so. And then that was how things went up until 2019. And that's when we adopted the new calendar. There was discussion around this, when by that time Dr. Stegall would have been the one presenting the calendar. That was one thing that was explained. This was something that school board members asked us to look at, was going to a more flexible schedule instead of the designated days. And so that's what's been done. Of course, COVID hit, which, so the memory of doing it the sort of new regular way, it really only lasted the 1 year. And then with the pandemic, things kind of, changed again. But that's where we are right now. So in terms of how that works. So why consider going back to designated days? Well, this is something that maybe I'm more of a traditionalist and so forth. I have maybe a certain bias that way sometimes. But what we do know from the last 2 years of the pandemic is that parents have in a lot of ways felt disconnected from our schools, right? And just even being able to be physically present. I'm so fortunate, or, so grateful for the leadership that our principals have provided, especially this past spring and the plans they're making for this fall. They're already doing all kinds of events, the PTOs are planning events, a lot of, back to school events, exhibition nights. These things are happening and good things are happening. But the idea kind of arose, well, what about that sort of more traditional approach to parent-teacher conference days? Is that something people would be interested in? And the thinking really more than anything was, if you go back to that, it's a strong signal, right, that we would want to invite parents in, for those purposes or whatever. So, I could see some reasons to, reconsider that. So again, just trying to think of ways to purposefully help parents reconnect with the schools. Kind of viewing the idea from my way of looking at parent-teacher conference days, it's kind of a way of, putting out their welcome mat, right? Not only for the back-to-school nights and things like that, but also, having those designated days. One thing that we're also mindful of, and not saying here and now that this is something that has to happen to facilitate this, because I'm not sure that it does have to happen this way, but you are well aware that, a whole long-term process of creating these graduates who, are getting to 12th grade and we're graduating not only with their diploma, but also their opportunity ready certification, right? And that's our long-term goal of having graduates provide evidence that they have, can actually do those profile of a graduate skills, okay, that we call opportunity ready skills. So, not only did they pass Algebra 2 and biology and all those classes in English, but they also have evidence that they can leave us with, provide to an employer that says, look, I've got evidence here that I'm a good communicator. I've got evidence here that I know how to work with people in group settings, which employers really value these days. They can collaborate. I've got evidence here that I know how to problem solve and be creative and think critically. As we've said, we've got some schools on board starting this coming year as sort of leading the way as pilot schools to even from elementary school, middle school, up into the high school level, to start that process of just developing portfolios that the students are actually creating, they're curating, decide what goes into that. And part of that process is actually having what we call student-led conferences. So, it puts the students in the driver's seat of saying, look, I'm aware of what I'm learning, here's my evidence, I'm talking to you as my parents and the teacher to kind of defend that. And so that's something that we're kind of looking to happen. And again, it's not that having a designated day is the only way to do that, but it kind of aligns well with the direction that we're headed with that. And I want to thank Ms. Hogan and Mr. Riley for their leadership in presenting that. In fact, this Wednesday, give a shout out, this Wednesday, part of what we do is at state levels, we participate as a school division of innovation, but we participate in the Virginia is for Learners Innovation Network, and our whole application and work toward that particular organization and the work that we've been doing is all centered around getting this up and running. So this Wednesday, you guys are, I know, presenting with down at Richmond with the Valen Group in terms of our progress toward that. So I plan on going down and taking a look at their presentation. Appreciate what they're doing to lead the way with that. Again, not saying this has to be tied to going back to designated days, but it kind of aligns really well. So a recommendation that we want to kind of bring for you today for some consideration is this. We know a couple of givens. We know that home school communication is vitally important, okay, for student progress, student achievement. We also know that schools have to be closed on election day. The reason I put that as a given because sometimes with our school calendar shifting to an earlier start date, election day falls a little bit lower or later than when that first 9 weeks ends. But since we have to be closed that day anyway, it just kind of makes sense, to kind of keep that in play as a designated parent-teacher conference day. If we go back to designating it like that, the other one, of course, be in February. Those are a couple of givens. A couple of assumptions that I know I have, and some folks that I've talked to, is that parents would really like this idea. I assume that's the case, and they may appreciate going back to that way. I've had some informal conversations with parents and gotten kind of a mixed bag of response, which is interesting to me because I assume that would be something they would really appreciate doing. But you can make of that what you will in terms of, how different parents, what suits them better, and different people will tell you different things. I also know that if we go back to designated days, since those would be, non-school days, of course, teachers have to, adjust for things like childcare and so forth. But if my recommendation would be if parents, if we know, not just based on my assumption, but if we know that, hey, most parents would really appreciate going back to designated days, and I think doing that sort of cost-benefit analysis, it makes it a win as far as really helping our parents reconnect. So what I'd like to do is actually do a survey of our parents, survey teachers as well, and kind of test those assumptions and see what preferences are, and just bring that back for information. And if it comes back that, hey, this seems like a really good idea based on that, then this would require an adjustment in our calendar, and that's something that I'd like for the board to consider, either for this year or certainly for next year. But I just think it's a good signal that we think this is important, right? We think that parent-teacher communication is important, and want to welcome them back in our school. So just want to bring that back for you for consideration. I know you guys have had some thoughts about this, and appreciate the support for the idea.
Any comments? Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Shawnee.
I think it's a great idea to survey the parents and the teachers. I think everything you said is spot on. The trend that we've seen towards with the pandemic and disconnecting from our schools is unfortunate, and we need to have a better opportunity to market our schools back, have our kids be proud of what they're doing in the schools. And I've heard about the student-led conferencing and the student-directed way of doing things is a great way to have them have ownership in their education, and it's very beneficial. So I'd like to see it. I have a feeling that a lot of folks would also like this to be able to do both options. So my only request would be in this survey to make it very clear that, we do have parents working home more so now than ever with Zoom meetings and everything else. So to have that be clear that would be an option also, so that they're not locked into one or the other. We can accommodate everything, but to get our parents walking back into the schools, seeing the artwork, seeing the successes our students are having, I think is really important, especially nowadays more than ever. And I'm not discrediting, anybody. I think we've done a great job. I just think the pandemic just caused a little bit of, yeah. And to your point also, we're reopening and we're doing great events and everything else, but we gotta make a real big push. It's important.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree. Any opportunity to get the parents involved and get them back in our schools is important. I think that's good information. Quick question, then, when we went from regular hours, conferences during regular hours to noon to 7, did the teachers, was that at the teacher's request? That was a parent's request?
Right. Well, I'm not sure the exact history, but, in terms of, that was under Dr. Weber's leadership, 20 years ago, but I can say, yeah, I'm sure the thought was, let's make it available more during, after kind of, you're talking about, the after hours part would be like the 5 to 7. And I think to Ms. Fashani's point, honestly, if we make it abundantly clear that, hey, with the welcome mat is still open, right? You can't come on the designated day during that time. Certainly scheduling them, as needed and so forth would be something we want to encourage. And really, I kind of have the same thought, if we really want to encourage in-person conferences, which I think is advantageous, honestly, I think, because these have to be after school hours, and if, I think it's better for teachers, frankly, to have that on a designated day versus feeling like, okay, I've got to, be doing an in-person conference, and especially if there are fewer people in the buildings, later in the evening and that kind of thing, I think it's actually a probably better idea for them to concentrate that and do it during the day, for their own, protection as well, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wright, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And being married to a teacher 20 years ago, actually 41 years today.
Happy anniversary.
Aw.
But anyway, I know the dedication of these teachers, and I know they will make the accommodations and get them back into school and see the things that are going on and whatever schedules that they may want to do, I know that these teachers will accommodate some of those things for these parents. Whether it be coming in a little early, you know, so they can get to work, or coming in, you know, a little later after that. So I think that's, you know, the flexibility, and giving them the flexibility for that, I think is important. So,
Have you looked at a potential date in January after the first semester is over that would work? Or is a November conference and then a January conference too
The
close?
second one is traditionally, in the current school calendar is on a date in, like the very first of February. And, you know, because you've got that holiday, Martin Luther King Day, it is tied to when the end of the, about halfway through that third 9 weeks. Okay, so there's probably not a strong reason to change it, you know, earlier, just because you're not that far into that second year, was it the third 9 weeks yet? Yeah. So I'd keep that in February.
Yeah, I would concur with Cheryl. I think getting the parent, there's never a bad time to get the parents involved and engaged. And in our schools, honestly, you're probably going to get low participation in the survey, which means it's going to skew to the other, you know, away from, you know, the direction of having the in-person. But I could see, and the teachers in my district probably will be thrilled with my answer, but not that they won't, but they would, you know, probably, I think it's even more important in our district to have that engagement. And, you know, even going back to the SRO conversation, you know, having that interaction personally, to me, is never a bad thing, and it's a good thing, and it's an opportunity to learn, you know, who your student is working with on a daily basis, to understand the demeanor, the curriculum, what's going on, and to be engaged from the Title I perspective, to me, is a great thing. You know, I hope I'm not going to offend anybody, but to me, sometimes virtual or phone is it's just a cop-out. It's not, to me, the most engaging way that we can make our schools more effective. Just my feeling. And I get that there are going to be a lot of people that just say, well, look, I'm too busy. This world we live in, that I'd just rather, hey, I'll call her and say hi. But
And sometimes that's the only way our teachers can, you know, engage with them.
Well, I'm not blaming
because,
you. I know the
right,
teachers
so,
are-
yeah, I mean, but definitely, I mean, I think there's a preference for in person, if you can get folks to come in, for sure.
And you know what, I didn't think about this, but I think you could actually get more out of the students, in essence, because the student now knows that mom and dad are meeting with the parents. And there's a dynamic there and a shift sometime that happens, which can be quite profound.
Coming from a student that had a parent that had lots of conferences, and it wasn't for academics all the time. I mean, it does. Well, y'all have to deal with me, so what do you think? So, I mean, it does make a difference, I think.
Well, so if there's no objection, what we'll do is proceed with the survey and endeavor to, I know this summer it could be tricky doing that, you know, in terms of getting people to respond is the only thing, but if we see we got a decent level of response, you know, by July, we can bring it back. If we see that, you know, the responses really are just too low to make meaning of it, we might need to.
What about back to school night?
Right, we could definitely do it in, you know, earlier when school gets started, you know, to hopefully get more engagement with a survey. I'd love to go ahead and try it, you know, to see what kind of response we would get, just to give people notice if we did go ahead and do this for this coming school year. I think that's what I would recommend, is go ahead and try it. And again, if we get a low response, you know, recognize, hey, that's too few people to kind of make a decision on. Let's try it again, you know, get more responses, you know, come first in August.
And in terms of surveys, and I think how they're most effective, you would know this more than anybody, but, you know, 5 questions on a survey takes 2 minutes.
Sure.
Is that the type of
Shorter
thing you're
the better,
thinking
right?
about? Yeah.
Shorter, but making sure that it's clear.
It's clear.
Right.
And, yeah, and concise, and,
Yeah.
not time consuming.
Mr. Hudson, any comments?
I just agree with everybody else. I think there's something to be said about face-to-face, sitting down with somebody and speaking, and kind of just have a better level of communication. And I, like Mr. Greenway, my mom drugged me to one of my parent-teacher conferences because I was such a character in school. So,
I've been there, yes.
but no, I do. I know I've had some face-to-face with, I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit in a different situation than most parents, but I've had some face-to-face conversations with my children's teachers, and it's been invaluable. So I think that level of communication is a lot better, at least for me, than looking at a computer screen or picking up the phone, so.
Yep. Plan on moving forward with that survey and keep us updated, please. All right. That's it for information items. Item 3, closed session. Mr. Hudson, would you like to read us into closed session?
Sure. I move that the Roanoke County School Board convene in closed session for the following: to discuss the acquisition of real property for public purpose where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the school board pursuant to real property exemption at 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia.
Second.
Madam Clerk, the roll.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Are we gonna go in there, or do we just gonna cut in here and stay here?
As long as he can cut everything off.
All right, I'd like, Mr. Hudson, would you call us, or read us out of closed session, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Roanoke County School Board come out of closed session for the following: to discuss the acquisition of real property for public purpose where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the school board pursuant to the real property exemption at 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia. Also move to certify a closed session. Move to certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the school board.
Second. Second. Madam Clerk, the roll.
Mr. Greenway,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Fachani,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lind.
Yes, ma'am. Item 3.03, action from closed session. I move that the school board authorize the superintendent to negotiate the terms of and to execute the purchase agreement for land on which a future CTE center will be located.
Second.
Motion and a second. Madam Clerk, the roll.
Mr. Greenway,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Fachani,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lind.
Yes, ma'am. And with that, meeting adjourned.